In the opulent halls of Ashwood Manor, a gala dinner turns deadly when Sir Reginald Harrow is found stabbed in his locked study, a cryptic letter burning in the fireplace. Hercule Poirot, the master detective, unravels a web of clues, a single white glove, a green thread, a jasmine scent, a pearl earring, and a tampered clock, each pointing to a suspect with dark secrets. Clara's inheritance, Lionel's debts, Grange's embezzlement, Evelyn's scandal, and a butler's hidden agenda. As alibis crumble and motives intertwine, Poirot's little gray cells race to expose a cunning killer before they strike again. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Ashwood Manor. The late afternoon sun cast a golden glow over the rolling hills of the English countryside as the train rattled along its iron path toward the village of Ashwood. Hercule Poirot, seated in a first-class carriage, adjusted his perfectly knotted tie and smoothed his immaculate mustache, his sharp green eyes fixed on the passing landscape. Beside him, Captain Arthur Hastings, his loyal friend and companion, leafed through a newspaper, occasionally muttering about cricket scores or the latest political scandal. The rhythmic clatter of the train wheels provided a soothing backdrop, but Poirot's mind was far from idle. His fingers rested lightly on a cream-colored envelope, its wax seal broken, its contents read and reread with meticulous care. "Mon ami," Poirot said, breaking the silence, his voice precise and accented. "You have not asked why we journey to this Ashwood Manor, no?" Hastings lowered his newspaper, his honest face betraying curiosity. "Well, Poirot, I assumed it was one of your little jaunts. A weekend in the country, good company, fine food, though I must say, you've been awfully quiet about it. What's the occasion?" Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile, one that suggested he knew more than he was willing to share just yet. He tapped the envelope against his knee. "It is not, as you say, a little jaunt. It is a summons, Hastings. A most curious summons from Sir Reginald Harrow, a man of considerable wealth and influence. He requests my presence at his estate for a weekend gathering to celebrate the engagement of his daughter, Mademoiselle Clara Harrow, to a certain Captain Lionel Drake." Hastings raised an eyebrow. "An engagement party? Sounds pleasant enough. But why the secrecy, old boy? You've got that look in your eye, the one that says there's more to this than meets the eye." Poirot inclined his head, acknowledging Hastings' perceptiveness. "You are not entirely wrong, my friend. The invitation is polite, yes, but there is a note, a private note, enclosed within." He slipped a smaller piece of paper from the envelope and handed it to Hastings. The handwriting was elegant but hurried, as though penned under some duress. It read, "Monsieur Poirot, your reputation precedes you. I fear there is a shadow over my house, a matter most delicate. I beg your discretion and your insight. Come to Ashwood, I implore you. R.H." Hastings frowned, passing the note back. "A shadow over the house? Sounds ominous. Do you know what he means?" Poirot shook his head, his expression thoughtful. "No, not yet. But Sir Reginald is a man of business, a titan of industry, they say. Such men do not write such words lightly. There is something amiss at Ashwood Manor, and Poirot, he is curious. Very curious indeed." The train slowed as it approached Ashwood Station, a quaint platform surrounded by hedgerows and blooming wildflowers. A liveried chauffeur awaited them, standing beside a gleaming Rolls-Royce. He tipped his cap respectfully. "Monsieur Poirot?" "Captain Hastings, I'm Jenkins, sir. Sent to fetch you to the manor." "Very good, Jenkins," Poirot replied, stepping onto the platform with the grace of a man who knew the value of appearances. "Lead on." The drive to Ashwood Manor was brief but scenic, winding through lanes flanked by ancient oaks and stone walls. The manor itself emerged like a vision from a storybook, a sprawling Elizabethan structure of red brick and leaded windows, its chimneys piercing the sky, its gardens meticulously tended. Ivy clung to the walls, and a fountain bubbled in the courtyard, catching the last rays of sunlight. Yet, despite its beauty, there was an air of stillness about the place, as though it held its breath. As they stepped from the car, the great oak doors of the manor swung open, and a tall, distinguished man in his late 50s emerged. His silver hair was neatly combed, his suit impeccably tailored, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of anxiety. This, Poirot deduced, was Sir Reginald Harrow himself. "Monsieur Poirot," Sir Reginald said, extending a hand, his voice warm but strained. "I cannot thank you enough for coming. And Captain Hastings, a pleasure. Welcome to Ashwood." "The pleasure, it is ours," Poirot replied, shaking the offered hand. "Your home, it is magnifique. A true jewel of the English countryside." Sir Reginald managed a tight smile. "You're too kind. Come, let me show you inside. The other guests are gathering for drinks before dinner." They followed him into a grand hall, its walls adorned with portraits of stern-faced ancestors and tapestries depicting pastoral scenes. A crystal chandelier glittered overhead, casting prisms of light across the polished oak floor. A maid took their coats, and Poirot's keen eyes swept the space, noting every detail. The faint scuff on the floor near the staircase, the slightly crooked frame of a painting, the distant sound of laughter from another room. Sir Reginald led them to a drawing room where the other guests were assembled, their voices mingling with the clink of glasses. The room was opulent, with velvet drapes, a roaring fire, and a long table set with decanters and crystal flutes. Poirot's gaze moved from face to face, cataloging each with the precision of a watchmaker. First there was Clara Harrow, the bride-to-be, a striking young woman in her mid-20s with auburn hair and a delicate, almost fragile beauty. Her emerald dress complemented her eyes, but there was a nervousness in her smile as she stood beside her fiancé, Captain Lionel Drake. Lionel was a handsome man, perhaps 30, with the bearing of a soldier, broad-shouldered, clean-shaven, but with a restless energy. His eyes darted about as though searching for an escape. Next was Lady Beatrice Harrow, Sir Reginald's older sister, a formidable woman in her 60s, with sharp features and a commanding presence. Her silver hair was pinned tightly, and her black gown spoke of old money and older grudges. She held a glass of sherry, her gaze coolly appraising as she nodded at Poirot. Victor Grange, Sir Reginald's business partner, was a heavy-set man with a ruddy complexion and a booming voice that seemed to fill the room. His suit was expensive, but ill-fitting, and his laughter was a touch too loud, as though compensating for some inner unease. Mr. Percival Holt, the family lawyer, was a thin, bespectacled man with a reserved demeanor. He clutched a briefcase, his fingers tapping nervously against its leather surface. His eyes met Poirot's briefly before looking away, as though afraid of scrutiny. Miss Evelyn Ward, Clara's friend from her school days, was a lively contrast to the somber Holt. Her blonde curls bounced as she laughed at something Lionel said, her blue eyes sparkling with mischief. She wore a fashionable dress of pale pink, and her perfume, a floral scent with a hint of jasmine, wafted faintly as she moved. Finally, there was Mr. Collins, the butler, a man of indeterminate age with a stiff posture and an air of quiet efficiency. His dark suit was immaculate, his movements precise as he poured drinks and offered canapés. Yet Poirot noticed a slight tremor in his hand as he passed a glass to Lady Beatrice. "Everyone," Sir Reginald announced, clapping his hands to draw attention, "may I present Monsieur Hercule Poirot, the renowned detective, and his friend, Captain Hastings. They've graciously joined us for the weekend." A murmur of interest rippled through the room. Clara smiled warmly, though her eyes remained wary. Lionel offered a hearty handshake, his grip almost too firm. Lady Beatrice raised an eyebrow, her expression skeptical. Victor Grange bellowed a welcome while Holt merely nodded. Evelyn clapped her hands, exclaiming, "Oh, a detective! How thrilling!" Only Collins remained silent, his face impassive. Dinner was announced, and the party moved to the dining room, a grand space with a long mahogany table set with silver and fine china. Poirot took his seat, strategically positioned to observe everyone. The conversation flowed, touching on Clara's engagement, the weather, and Sir Reginald's latest business ventures. Yet Poirot sensed undercurrents, glances exchanged, words left unsaid. Clara spoke of her wedding plans, her voice soft but strained. "We're thinking of a spring ceremony, perhaps in the village church. It's what Mother would have wanted." "Lady, no." Beatrice snorted, her tone sharp. "Your mother had romantic notions, Clara. They didn't serve her well." An awkward silence followed. Sir Reginald cleared his throat. "Let's not dwell on the past, Beatrice. This is a time for celebration. Victor," Grange raised his glass, "to Clara and Lionel, may their future be as bright as this chandelier." The toast was met with polite smiles, but Poirot noted Lionel's hand tightening on his glass and Clara's eyes darting to her father. Evelyn, ever the peacemaker, launched into a story about a recent trip to Paris, her laughter easing the tension. Yet Poirot's attention was drawn to a small detail. A single white glove, delicately embroidered, left on the table near Clara's plate. It was out of place, unpaired, and no one seemed to notice it. As the meal progressed, Sir Reginald grew quieter, his earlier warmth replaced by a distracted air. Midway through the main course, roast pheasant with a rich sauce, he stood abruptly. "If you'll excuse me, I have some matters to attend to. Please enjoy the evening." He left the room and Poirot's instincts prickled. The glove remained on the table, untouched. He leaned toward Hastings, murmuring, "Observe, mon ami. The glove, it is curious, no? Why is it alone?" Hastings glanced at it, puzzled. "Probably Clara's. Forgot the other one, I suppose." "Perhaps," Poirot said, but his tone suggested doubt. But Poirot, he does not believe in accidents. The dinner continued, with Lady Beatrice dominating the conversation, her comments laced with barbs about Lionel's military career and Victor's business acumen. Chapter 2. The Gala Dinner. The dining room at Ashwood Manor glowed with the soft radiance of candlelight, the flames flickering in their silver holders and casting intricate shadows across the polished mahogany table. The air was rich with the aroma of roasted pheasant, glazed with a sauce of red wine and juniper berries, accompanied by buttery potatoes and a medley of seasonal vegetables. Crystal glasses sparkled, reflecting the grandeur of the chandelier above, its prisms scattering light like a constellation brought indoors. Hercule Poirot, seated between Captain Hastings and Miss Evelyn Ward, observed the scene with his usual meticulous attention, his sharp green eyes missing nothing, not the slight tremor in Sir Reginald Harrow's hand as he lifted his wineglass, nor the fleeting glance exchanged between Clara Harrow and her fiancé, Captain Lionel Drake. The table was set for 9, each place marked with fine bone china and silver cutlery, engraved with the Harrow family crest, a rearing lion beneath, a crown of laurel. Poirot noted the precision of the arrangement, the work of Mr. Collins, the butler whose silent efficiency had not gone unnoticed. Collins moved like a shadow, refilling glasses and clearing plates with a deference that bordered on invisibility. Yet Poirot sensed a watchfulness in the man's demeanor, a subtle alertness that belied his servile role. Conversation flowed, though it carried an undercurrent of restraint. Sir Reginald, at the head of the table, played the gracious host, his deep voice recounting anecdotes of his industrial triumphs, factories built, markets conquered. Yet his eyes, Poirot observed, were troubled, darting occasionally to his daughter, Clara, who sat opposite him, her auburn hair catching the candlelight. Clara's beauty was delicate, almost ethereal, but her smile was forced, her fingers twisting the stem of her glass as though seeking reassurance in its cool surface. "Monsieur Poirot," Sir Reginald said, turning to him with a practiced smile, "you must tell us, how does a man of your talents find himself in the quiet of the English countryside? Surely London's mysteries call to you." Poirot inclined his head, his moustache twitching with a hint of amusement. "Monsieur, the mysteries, they are not confined to cities. The human heart, it carries its secrets everywhere. Even to a place as charming as Ashwood. And I, Hercule Poirot, am always curious." A ripple of laughter followed, though Lady Beatrice Harrow, seated to Sir Reginald's right, gave a derisive snort. Her silver hair was pinned severely, her black gown a stark contrast to the room's opulence. "Curiosity," she said, her voice sharp as a blade, "can be a dangerous thing, Monsieur Poirot. Some secrets are best left buried." Poirot met, her gaze, his expression unreadable. "Perhaps, madame, but the truth it has a way of rising like the cream to the top of the milk." Hastings, ever eager to smooth over tension, chimed in. "Well, I for one am glad Poirot's here. Adds a bit of excitement to the weekend, what? And congratulations again to Clara and Lionel. Jolly good news, your engagement." Clara's cheeks flushed and she murmured her thanks, her eyes briefly meeting Lionel's. The captain, handsome in his tailored dinner jacket, raised his glass. "To Clara," he said, his voice warm but tinged with an edge Poirot could not quite place. "The brightest star in my sky." The toast was met with polite applause, though Victor Grange, Sir Reginald's business partner, clapped with excessive enthusiasm, his ruddy face flushed from wine. "Hear, hear," he boomed, his voice filling the room. "To the happy couple and to Sir Reginald for throwing the splendid bash." Grange's joviality felt forced, and Poirot noted the slight tightening of Sir Reginald's jaw. The two men were partners, yes, but there was no warmth between them. Grange's suit, though expensive, was ill-fitting, his tie slightly askew, suggesting a man more concerned with appearances than precision. Poirot filed this away, along with the way Grange's eyes lingered on Clara, a touch too long for mere friendliness. Miss Evelyn Ward, seated beside Poirot, leaned closer, her floral perfume wafting gently. "Oh, Monsieur Poirot, isn't it also romantic?" she said, her blue eyes sparkling. "Clara and Lionel so in love. It's like something out of a novel." Poirot smiled, charmed by her exuberance. "Romance, mademoiselle, it is a beautiful thing. But tell me, you have known Mademoiselle Clara long?" "Since our school days," Evelyn replied, her curls bouncing as she nodded. "We were inseparable at St. Margaret's. Clara was always the quiet one, but so kind. I'm thrilled. For her, truly." Her sincerity seemed genuine, yet Poirot detected a flicker of something, worry perhaps, in her expression. He made a mental note to probe further, but his attention was drawn to Mr. Percival Holt, the family lawyer, who had spoken little all evening. Holt's thin frame was hunched, his spectacles catching the candlelight as he pushed his food around, his plate. His briefcase rested at his feet, a silent sentinel, and Poirot wondered what documents it held. Wills, perhaps, or secrets of a different kind. As the first course was cleared, Sir Reginald stood, tapping his glass for attention. The room fell silent, all eyes on him. "My friends," he began, his voice steady but carrying a weight that made Poirot's senses sharpen. "Tonight is a celebration, not only of Clara's happiness, but of our family's future. I've been reflecting on my legacy, as one does, at my age. To that end, I intend to revise my will to ensure that Ashwood and all it represents endures." A hush followed, broken only by the faint crackle of the fire in the hearth. Clara's eyes widened, her hand reaching for Lionel's under the table. Lady Beatrice's lips pursed, her fingers tightening on her glass. Grange's smile faltered, and Holt's head snapped up, his expression unreadable. Evelyn glanced at Clara, concern etched on her face, while Collins, standing by the sideboard, paused mid-motion, his tray of decanters momentarily still. Poirot's gaze swept the table, cataloging each reaction. The announcement was no mere formality. It had struck a nerve like a stone thrown into a still pond. He leaned back, his mind racing. A will, he knew, was often the spark that ignited motive, greed, fear, betrayal. And in that moment, he felt, the shadow Sir Reginald had mentioned in his note, a palpable presence in the room. "Father," Clara said softly, breaking the silence. "Must we speak of such things tonight?" Sir Reginald's expression softened, but only slightly. "My dear, it's a practicality. You'll understand in time. Now let's enjoy the evening." The conversation resumed, but the mood had shifted. Lady Beatrice launched into a critique of modern society, her tone biting, People today have no sense of duty, she said, her eyes flicking toward Lionel. Marriages are made for convenience, not honor. Lionel's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, his hand still clasped, with Clara's. Poirot noted the captain's restraint, wondering what lay beneath his polished exterior. Gambling debts, perhaps? A soldier's pride wounded by a wealthy fiancée? The possibilities intrigued him. Grange, meanwhile, steered the talk to business, boasting of a new venture in steel production. "The future's in industry," he declared, his voice slurring slightly. "Reginald and I were building an empire." Sir Reginald's smile was thin. "Let's not bore our guests, Victor." Poirot's attention returned to the table, where the single white glove he had noticed earlier still lay near Clara's plate, untouched. It was an oddity, unpaired and out of place in such a meticulously arranged setting. He leaned toward Hastings, murmuring, "The glove, mon ami. It is still there. Curious, no?" Hastings glanced at it, frowning. "Probably Clara's, as I said. Women's fashion, you know, always leaving things about." "No," Poirot said softly. "It is not so simple. Observe its position, its solitude. It tells a story, if one listens." Before Hastings could reply, Evelyn clapped her hands, drawing attention. "Oh, let's have some music after dinner. Clara, you must play the piano, you're so talented." Clara demurred, but the suggestion lightened the mood. As the main course was served, Poirot engaged Evelyn in conversation, probing gently. "Mademoiselle, you spoke of Paris. Did you and Mademoiselle Clara travel there together?" Evelyn's smile faltered just for a moment. "Oh no, that was just me last summer. Clara was busy with family matters, but we wrote to each other, of course." Poirot nodded, sensing a half-truth. He turned to Holt, who sat across from him. "Monsieur Holt, as the family lawyer, you must have a most responsible role. The revision of a will, it is a delicate matter, oui?" Holt adjusted his spectacles, his voice low. "Indeed, Monsieur Poirot, it requires precision and discretion." The word hung in the air, and Poirot felt another piece of the puzzle slide into place. Discretion, secrets, shadows. He glanced at Sir Reginald, who was now deep in conversation with Grange, their voices low and tense. Something was amiss, and Poirot's instincts told him it was more than a family squabble. As the meal progressed, Colin served the dessert, a lemon soufflé, light and tangy, paired with a sweet dessert wine. Poirot savored it, but his mind was elsewhere, weaving together the threads of the evening. The glove, Sir Reginald's announcement, the guests' reactions. He noticed Clara's hand tremble as she reached for her glass, and Lionel's protective gesture as he steadied her. Lady Beatrice's eyes were fixed on her brother, her expression unreadable. Grange's laughter grew louder, Holt's silence deeper. Then, as coffee was served, Sir Reginald stood again, his face pale. "If you'll excuse me," he said, his voice strained. "I must attend to some correspondence. Please continue without me." Chapter 3. The Midnight Scream. The clock in the grand hall of Ashwood Manor struck 11, its chimes reverberating through the silent corridors, a solemn reminder of the late hour. Hercule Poirot, seated in his guest suite, adjusted the cuffs of his silk pajamas and sipped a tisane of chamomile, its delicate aroma soothing his senses. The room was elegantly appointed, with a four-poster bed draped in damask, a mahogany writing desk, and a window offering a view of the moonlit gardens. Below, Captain Hastings, already in his nightshirt, was sprawled in an armchair, recounting the evening's events with his usual enthusiasm. "I say, Poirot," Hastings said, stifling a yawn, "that dinner was a bit tense, wasn't it? All that talk of wills and legacies, and that glove you kept staring at, what's so special about it?" Poirot set down his cup, his green eyes gleaming in the lamplight. "Mon ami, the glove, it is a detail most curious. A single glove, left alone on a table so meticulously arranged, it is not an accident. It speaks of carelessness, or perhaps intention. And Poirot, he does not believe in carelessness where human motives are concerned." Hastings frowned, scratching his head. "You think someone left it there on purpose? But why?" Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. That, Hastings, is the question. The glove, it is a thread in the tapestry of this evening, and I must unravel its meaning. But for now, we must rest. The mind, it requires repose to function, with clarity. He rose, intending to retire, when a piercing scream shattered the silence of the manor. It was a sound of raw terror, high and desperate, echoing from somewhere below. Hastings bolted upright, his eyes wide. "Good Lord, Poirot, what was that?" Poirot was already at the door, his dressing gown hastily donned. "Quickly, mon ami, we must discover the source of this cry." They hurried down the grand staircase, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. The hall was dimly lit, the chandelier's glow now extinguished, replaced by the flicker of wall sconces. Other doors opened along the corridor, and the guests emerged, their faces pale and anxious. Clara Harrow, wrapped in a shawl, her auburn hair loose, clutched the arm of Captain Lionel Drake, whose military bearing was strained by alarm. Lady Beatrice Harrow, her silver hair disheveled, stood ramrod straight, her eyes narrowed. Victor. Grange stumbled out, his shirt untucked, a glass of brandy still in hand. Mr. Percival Holt, the lawyer, clutched his ever-present briefcase, his spectacles askew. Miss Evelyn Ward, in a silk dressing gown, hovered near Clara, her blue eyes wide with fear. Mr. Collins, the butler, appeared last, his calm demeanor fraying at the edges, a lantern in his hand. "Where did it come from?" Lionel demanded, his voice sharp. "Who screamed?" "It was from the study," Collins said, his tone steady but his hands trembling slightly. "Sir Reginald's study, I believe." Without another word, the group moved toward the study, a heavy oak door, at the end of the hall. Poirot led the way, his small frame radiating authority. The door was shut, and when Collins tried the handle, it resisted. "It's locked," he said, a note of unease in his voice. "Locked?" Lady Beatrice snapped. "Reginald never locks. His study at night. Break it down." Lionel stepped forward, but Poirot raised a hand. "Non, non, monsieur, we must preserve the scene. Collins, you have a key, oui?" The butler nodded, producing a ring of keys from his pocket. His fingers fumbled as he selected one, and the door swung open with a creak. The group crowded into the doorway, and a collective gasp escaped them. Sir Reginald Harrow lay slumped over his desk, his silver hair matted with blood. A letter opener, its handle ornate with silver filigree, protruded from his chest, a dark stain spreading across his white shirt. The room was in disarray, papers scattered, a chair overturned, a half-burned letter smoldering in the fireplace. The air carried a faint, sweet scent like jasmine, though it was quickly overwhelmed by the metallic tang of blood. Clara screamed again, burying her face in Lionel's shoulder. Evelyn caught her arm, murmuring words of comfort. Grange swore under his breath, his brandy glass slipping to the floor with a crash. Holt stood frozen, his briefcase clutched like a shield. Lady Beatrice's face was a mask of stone, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of shock. Collins, lantern in hand, stepped forward, his face pale but composed. Poirot moved swiftly, his eyes scanning the scene with surgical precision. "Do not touch anything," he commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. "This is a crime scene, and every detail it is vital." Hastings, at his side, whispered, "Good heavens, Poirot, is he—" "Oui, Hastings," Poirot said softly. "Sir Reginald is dead. Murdered, I fear." The word hung in the air, heavy and final. Clara sobbed, and Lionel tightened his arm around her. "Who would do this?" he demanded, his voice hoarse. "He was fine at dinner." Lady Beatrice's voice was cold. Clearly someone was not fine with him. Reginald had enemies, as all powerful men do. Poirot ignored the exchange, kneeling beside the body. Sir Reginald's eyes were open, frozen in a look of surprise, as though death had caught him unawares. The letter opener was embedded deeply, suggesting force and intent. Poirot's gaze moved to the desk, noting a spilled ink pot, a quill pen, and a few crumpled papers. The half-burned letter in the fireplace caught his attention, its edges charred but some words still legible. He leaned closer, careful not to, disturbed the ashes and discerned fragments. Betrayal. trust, consequences. He straightened, his mind racing. The window, slightly ajar, admitted a cool breeze, and Poirot noticed a tiny thread, green and silken, caught on the latch. He plucked it carefully, slipping it into his pocket. The scent of jasmine lingered, faint but unmistakable, and he filed it away as another piece of the puzzle. "Collins," Poirot said, turning to the butler, "when was the last time you saw Sir Reginald alive?" Collins swallowed, his composure faltering. "After dinner, sir. He said he was coming here to work. I brought him a brandy around 10 o'clock, and he was fine." "And this door, it was locked when you left?" "Yes, sir. He often locked it when working late, to avoid interruptions." Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing. "And the scream? Who heard it first?" "I did," Evelyn said, her voice trembling. "I was in my room reading. It came from this direction, so I ran out." Clara nodded, her face tear-streaked. "I heard it too. I was just down the hall." The others murmured agreement, their voices overlapping. Poirot raised a hand for silence. "We must send for the police. Inspector Japp, he is known to me. He will handle this matter with efficiency. Collins, make the call." The butler nodded and hurried off. Poirot turned to the group. "Until the police arrive, no one is to leave this house, and no one, under any circumstances, is to enter this room again." Lady Beatrice raised an eyebrow. "You take charge. Very quickly, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot met her gaze. "Madame, when murder is done, there is no time for hesitation. The truth, it waits for no one." As the guests dispersed, their faces a mixture of shock and suspicion, Poirot lingered in the study, his mind cataloging every detail: the locked door, the burned letter, the thread, the jasmine scent, and, most curiously, the absence of the single white glove he had noticed at dinner. It was gone, vanished as though it had never been. "Hastings," he said softly, "this is no ordinary crime. The locked room, the clues, they are a challenge, a puzzle set by a mind most cunning. But Poirot, he will solve it." Chapter 4. The Locked Room. Puzzle the study of Ashwood Manor was a silent tableau of tragedy, its heavy air thick with the scent of blood and the faint, lingering trace of jasmine. The single oil lamp on Sir Reginald Harrow's desk cast a flickering glow, illuminating the grim scene. Sir Reginald's lifeless form slumped forward, the silver-handled letter opener protruding from his chest, and the scattered papers that hinted at a struggle, or a staged one. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small frame a still point amidst the chaos, his green eyes darting from detail to detail with the precision of a jeweler inspecting a gem. Captain Hastings hovered near the door, his face pale, his usual cheer replaced by a quiet unease as he watched his friend work. "Mon ami," Poirot said, his voice low but commanding. "Close the door, if you please. We must preserve this scene until Inspector Japp arrives. Every thread, every speck of dust, it may hold the key to this murder." Hastings complied, shutting the heavy oak door with a thud that echoed in the confined space. The lock, Poirot noted, was a sturdy mechanism, its key still in place on the inside. He approached the desk, careful not to disturb the papers, and leaned closer to examine Sir Reginald's body. The man's eyes were wide, frozen in a moment of shock, his hands splayed across the desk as though reaching for something, or someone. The letter opener was embedded deeply, the wound precise, suggesting a single forceful strike. Poirot's gaze lingered on the blood still wet, indicating the murder had occurred mere hours ago, likely soon after Sir Reginald left the dining room. "Poor chap," Hastings murmured, shaking his head. "To think he was joking with us just a few hours ago. Who could do such a thing, Poirot?" Poirot did not answer immediately, his attention drawn to the fireplace. The half-burned letter he had noticed earlier lay among the ashes, its edges charred but fragments of text still legible. He crouched, using a pair of tweezers from his pocket to retrieve the remnants without disturbing their position. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind used for formal correspondence. He held it to the light, deciphering the words: "Your betrayal, cannot forgive. Consequences. The handwriting was elegant but hurried, the ink smudged in places, as though written in haste or anger. A letter of accusation, Poirot mused aloud, slipping the fragments into a small envelope for safekeeping. But to whom was it addressed, and by whom was it written? This, Hastings, is a piece of our puzzle. He moved to the window, slightly ajar, its latch gleaming in the lamplight. The green silken thread he had pocketed earlier had come from here, caught on the rough edge of the latch. He examined the window frame, noting its narrow dimensions, too small for a man to climb through, but perhaps sufficient for a tool or a hand. The thread, he suspected, belonged to Clara Harrow's shawl, which he had seen her wearing at dinner. Yet the window's position raised questions. If it was not an entry point, why was it open? And why the thread? Poirot's eyes swept the room, again cataloging every detail. The overturned chair, the spilled ink pot, the quill pen lying askew. A faint smudge of ink stained the desk, and he noticed a curious absence. The single white glove from the dining table was nowhere to be seen. He had watched Collins clear the table, and the glove had vanished with the butler's tray. Was it a coincidence or something more deliberate? Hastings, Poirot said, turning to his friend. This room, it is a locked room, oui? The door was locked from the inside, the key still in place. The window, it is too small for entry. Yet Sir Reginald is dead, murdered with a weapon from his own desk. How then did the killer enter and leave? Hastings scratched his chin, frowning. Well, it could be suicide, couldn't it? Locked room, letter opener from the desk. Maybe he was in some sort of trouble. Poirot shook his head, his mustache twitching with disapproval. Non, mon. Suicide, it does not fit. The angle of the wound, it is too precise, too forceful for a man to inflict upon himself. And the letter, why burn it if he meant to end his life? No, this is murder. And the locked room, it is a clever trick, meant to confuse. He paced the room, his polished shoes silent on the Persian rug. The jasmine scent lingered, faint but persistent, and he paused by the desk, sniffing the air. This perfume, he said, it is familiar, no? I recall it from the dinner, perhaps from one of the ladies. We must ascertain its source. Before Hastings could respond, a sharp knock sounded at the door. Collins appeared, his face ashen. Monsieur Poirot, Inspector Japp has arrived. He's in the drawing room with the others. Bon, Poirot said. We shall join him. But first, Collins, tell me, did you notice a single white glove on the dining table tonight? The butler blinked, caught off guard. A glove, sir? I believe I did, yes. It was near Miss Clara's place. I cleared it with the table linens. And where is it now? Poirot asked, his tone deceptively mild. Collins hesitated, his eyes flickering. In the kitchen, sir, with the other linens to be laundered. Poirot nodded, dismissing him. Merci, we will see it later. As Collins retreated, Hastings raised an eyebrow. You think the glove's important, don't you? Everything. Hastings is important until it is proven otherwise, Poirot replied. Come, let us meet Inspector Japp. They descended to the drawing room, where the guests were gathered, their faces a study in shock and suspicion. Inspector Japp, a stocky man with a bristling mustache and a no-nonsense demeanor, stood by the fireplace, notebook in hand. His eyes lit up at the sight of Poirot. Well, if it isn't Hercule Poirot himself. Didn't expect to see you in this mess, but I'm glad you're here. This is a nasty business. Indeed, Inspector, Poirot said, shaking his hand. A murder most perplexing. You have examined the body? Japp nodded. Just a quick look. Stabbed clean through, poor devil. Looks like a crime of passion, if you ask me. Letter opener's not exactly a professional's weapon. But this, locked room business, that's a puzzle. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A puzzle, oui, but one we shall solve. Tell me, what have the guests said? Japp flipped open his notebook. Not much yet. They're all claiming they were in their rooms when the scream was heard. Miss Clara says she was reading. Captain Drake was in the garden smoking. Lady Beatrice heard a noise but stayed put. Mr. Grange was in the library. Mr. Holt was working in his room. And Miss Ward was with Miss Clara until just before the scream. The butler, Collins, was in the kitchen overseeing the staff. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloging the alibis. And the scream, who reported it first? Miss Ward, Japp said. She says she heard it from her room and alerted the others. Miss Clara confirms it. Interesting, Poirot murmured. He turned to the guests who sat in tense silence, their eyes darting between him and Japp. Clara clung to Lionel, her face tear-streaked. Lady Beatrice sat erect, her hands folded tightly. Grange nursed a fresh brandy, his ruddy face flushed. Holt's fingers tapped nervously on his briefcase. Evelyn's usual vivacity was dimmed, her eyes red-rimmed. Collins stood by the door, his expression unreadable. Monsieur Poirot, Japp said, lowering his voice. You've got that look. Got any theories already? Poirot smiled faintly. Theories, Inspector, they are premature. But clues, they are everywhere. The burned letter, the thread, the perfume, the missing glove. These are the threads of our tapestry. We must weave them together. Japp grunted. You and your threads. All right, I'll have my men search the grounds and the house. But that locked room, it's got me stumped. Patience, mon ami, Poirot said. The room, it will speak to us if we listen. As Japp organized his constables, Poirot returned to the study, determined to examine it further before the police disturbed the scene. He moved methodically, inspecting the desk, the fireplace, the window. The thread, he confirmed, matched Clara's shawl, but its presence on the window latch was curious. Had she been in the room, or was it planted? The jasmine scent suggested a woman's presence, yet it could be a deliberate misdirection. And the glove, its absence was as telling as its earlier presence. He paused by the fireplace, his mind racing. The burned letter pointed to a personal motive. Betrayal, perhaps, as Sir Reginald's announcement about his will had suggested. The locked room implied a clever killer, one who knew the manor's layout and habits. Poirot's fingers brushed the desk, and he noticed a faint scratch on the wood, barely visible in the lamplight. It was fresh, as though something had been dragged across it, a key perhaps, or a tool. Hastings, he said, beckoning his friend. Observe this scratch. It is recent, non? It suggests movement, perhaps in haste. Hastings peered at it, puzzled. Could be anything, Poirot. Maybe Sir Reginald dropped something. Perhaps, Poirot said, but his tone was skeptical. But in a murder, nothing is just anything. We must question the guests, verify their alibis, and find that glove. As the night wore on, Poirot and Japp began their interrogation, starting with Clara. Her grief seemed genuine, but her nervous glances at Lionel raised questions. Lionel's alibi of being in the garden was unconfirmed, and Poirot noted mud on his shoes. Had he been outside, or was it another clue? Lady Beatrice's imperious demeanor hit a sharp mind, and her room's proximity to the study made her a person of interest. Grange's bluster-masked fear and Holt's reticence suggested secrets. Evelyn's tears seemed heartfelt, but her quickness to report the scream was curious. Collins, ever the dutiful servant, answered smoothly, yet his earlier hesitation about the glove. Chapter 5. The Suspect's Secrets. The drawing room of Ashwood Manor was cloaked in the somber glow of early morning, the heavy velvet curtains drawn against the pale dawn. The fire in the hearth had dwindled to embers, casting a faint warmth over the assembled guests who sat in a tense semicircle, their faces etched with exhaustion and unease. Hercule Poirot stood by the fireplace, his small, immaculate figure a beacon of calm amidst the storm of suspicion that had descended upon the house. His green eyes, sharp as ever, moved from one guest to another, cataloging their every gesture, every flicker of emotion. Captain Hastings sat near the door, his notebook open, scribbling observations as Poirot had instructed. Inspector Japp, his bristling mustache twitching with impatience, paced near the window, occasionally muttering about the complexities of the case. The murder of Sir Reginald Harrow had transformed Ashwood Manor from a place of celebration to a crucible of secrets, and Poirot knew that the truth lay hidden in the hearts of those now gathered before him. Clara Harrow, her auburn hair loosely pinned, clutched a handkerchief, her eyes red from crying. Captain Lionel Drake sat beside her, his hand resting protectively on hers, though his own expression was strained, his jaw tight. Lady Beatrice, Harrow, regal in her black mourning dress, sat erect, her silver hair gleaming under the lamplight, her gaze cold and unyielding. Victor Grange, Sir Reginald's business partner, slouched in an armchair, his ruddy face flushed from lack of sleep and too much brandy. Mr. Percival Holt, the family lawyer, clutched his briefcase, his thin frame hunched as though shielding himself from scrutiny. Miss Evelyn Ward, Clara's friend, fidgeted with the hem of her dress, her usual vivacity subdued, her blue eyes darting nervously. Mr. Collins, the butler, stood by the sideboard, his posture stiff, his face a mask of professional detachment, though Poirot noted the slight tremor in his hands as he poured coffee. "Monsieur Poirot," Japp said, breaking the silence, "we've got a locked room, a dead man, and a house full of people with alibis that don't quite add up. I've got my men searching the grounds, but I'm counting on you to make sense of this mess." Poirot inclined his head, his mustache twitching with a faint smile. "Inspector, the mess, as you call it, is but a tapestry of motives and misdirection. The truth, it is here, in this room, in the words and silences of those present. We shall begin by uncovering the secrets each holds, for in secrets we find motive, and in motive we find the murderer." He turned to the group, his voice clear and precise. "Mesdames et messieurs, Sir Reginald Harrow was murdered last night, stabbed in his study, a room locked from the inside. The letter opener, the burned letter, the thread on the window latch, the scent of jasmine. These are the clues we have. But clues alone do not tell the story. I ask you now to speak, to share what you know, for the truth cannot hide forever." A heavy silence followed, broken only by the soft ticking of the mantel clock. Clara's shoulders shook, and she spoke, first her voice trembling. "Father, he was worried these past weeks. He didn't say why, but I could see it in his eyes. He mentioned the will, yes, but there was something else, something he wouldn't tell me." Poirot's eyes softened, but his tone remained firm. "Mademoiselle Clara, this something else. Can you describe it? A person, a letter, a conversation?" Clara hesitated, glancing at Lionel. He argued with Lionel a few days ago. About money, I think. Lionel's been struggling with debts from his time in the army. Father didn't approve." Lionel's face darkened and he leaned forward, his voice sharp. "That's hardly a secret, Clara. Yes, I owe money. Gambling, cards, the usual foolishness of youth. Sir Reginald was upset, but we settled it. I promised to clear my debts before the wedding. I had no reason to harm him." Poirot's gaze lingered on Lionel, noting the defensive edge in his tone. "Monsieur Drake, where were you when the scream was heard? You said you were in the garden, oui?" Lionel nodded, his eyes steady. "Smoking a cigarette by the rose arbor. I needed air after dinner. I heard the scream and ran inside." "And yet," Poirot said, his voice deceptively mild, "there were no footprints in the garden despite the damp grass. Curious, non?" Lionel's jaw tightened. But before he could respond, Lady Beatrice spoke, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. "Really, Monsieur Poirot, must we air every petty grievance? My brother was a man of power, and power breeds enemies. If you're looking for motives, look to Victor Grange. He and Reginald were at odds over a business deal, a risky venture, that could have ruined them both." Grange sputtered, his brandy glass nearly slipping from his hand. "That's slander, Beatrice. Yes, Reginald and I disagreed, but it was business, nothing more. I'd never harm him. He was my partner, my friend." Poirot turned to Grange, his eyes narrowing. "Monsieur Grange, this venture, what was it, and why did it cause such discord?" Grange shifted uncomfortably, wiping his brow. "A new factory in Birmingham. Steel production, high risk but high reward. Reginald wanted to pull out, said it was too speculative. I thought he was being cautious, but, well, we argued. That's all." Poirot nodded, filing away the information. He turned to Holt, who had remained silent, his fingers drumming on his briefcase. "Monsieur Holt, as Sir Reginald's lawyer, you were privy to his plans for the will. What can you tell us?" Holt adjusted his spectacles, his voice low and measured. Sir Reginald intended to revise his will as he announced at dinner. He wished to secure Clara's future, but there was a codicil, a private matter. I'm not at liberty to disclose it. Poirot's mustache twitched. Not at liberty, monsieur? A man is dead, and secrets, they are no longer private. This codicil, what did it concern? Holt's eyes flickered, and he clutched his briefcase tighter. It involved a family matter from years ago, a question of inheritance. I can say no more. Poirot let the silence stretch, his gaze unrelenting. He turned to Evelyn, who sat twisting her handkerchief. Mademoiselle Ward, you were quick to report the scream. You were with Mademoiselle Clara, oui? Evelyn nodded, her voice soft. Yes, we were talking in her room. I left to get a book from mine, and that's when I heard it. I ran to the hall and saw the others. And you, mademoiselle, have no secrets to share? Poirot asked, his tone gentle but probing. Evelyn's cheeks flushed. I owed Sir Reginald money. A loan from last year for a failed venture of my own. He was kind about it, but I was to repay him soon. I'd never hurt him, Monsieur Poirot, I swear. Poirot's eyes gleamed, another piece of the puzzle falling into place. He turned to Collins, who stood like a statue by the sideboard. Monsieur Collins, you cleared the dining table last night. The white glove, it was among the linens, you said. Where is it now? Collins' composure faltered, his eyes darting to the floor. In the laundry, sir, as I told you. I can fetch it if you wish. Oui, I wish it, Poirot said. And, tell me, what did you see when you brought Sir Reginald his brandy at 10 o'clock? Collins swallowed, his voice steady but strained. He was at his desk writing. He seemed agitated, but he dismissed me quickly. That was the last I saw of him. Poirot nodded, dismissing the butler to retrieve the glove. As Collins left, Japp muttered, Everyone's got something to hide, Poirot. Debts, arguments, secret codicils, how do we sort through it all? With method, Inspector, Poirot replied, and with the little gray cells. Each secret, it is a thread, and we shall weave them together. The interrogations continued, each guest revealing fragments of their lives, their connections to Sir Reginald, their potential motives. Clara's revelation about Lionel's debts pointed to financial strain, but her own grief seemed genuine. Lionel's shaky alibi and defensive demeanor raised suspicions, yet his devotion to Clara appeared sincere. Lady Beatrice's accusation against Grange hinted at deeper business rivalries, and her own imperious nature suggested she knew more than she let on. Grange's bluster masked fear, his risky venture a possible motive if Sir Reginald had threatened to expose him. Holt's reticence about the codicil suggested a family secret, perhaps tied to Clara's inheritance. Evelyn's debt added another layer, though her tears and loyalty to Clara made her an unlikely killer. Collins's nervousness, especially, about the glove, was a curious anomaly, his role as the unseen observer giving him unique access to the household's secrets. Poirot moved among the guests, his questions precise, his observations acute. He noted the way Clara's hand trembled when she spoke of her father, the way Lionel's eyes avoided hers when debts were mentioned. Lady Beatrice's sharp glances at Grange's uneasy fidgeting, Holt's protective grip on his briefcase, Evelyn's quick glances at Clara, all were pieces of the puzzle. The glove, he suspected, was a key. Its disappearance from the dining table to the laundry a deliberate act, though by whom and why remained unclear. As the morning wore on, Collins returned with the glove, now slightly crumpled but unmistakably the same, white, embroidered, sized for a small hand. Poirot examined it, noting a faint stain, possibly ink, on the fingertip. This glove, he said, holding it up. It was left at the table, then cleared by Monsieur Collins. It fits, perhaps, Mademoiselle Clara, Mademoiselle Ward, or even Madame Beatrice. Whose is it? Clara shook her head. Not mine. I wore none tonight. Evelyn frowned. I had gloves, but they were blue, and I left them in my room. Lady Beatrice sniffed. I have no need for such. Chapter 6. The Missing Glove. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of Ashwood Manor, casting long shadows across the drawing room where Hercule Poirot stood, holding the single white glove aloft like a conductor poised to begin a symphony. Its delicate embroidery caught the sunlight, the faint ink stain on its fingertip a silent accusation in the tense atmosphere. The guests, seated in a semicircle, watched him with a mixture of apprehension and curiosity. Clara Harrow's tear-streaked face was pale, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Captain Lionel Drake sat beside her, his military posture rigid, his eyes fixed on the glove as though it might betray him. Lady Beatrice Harrow's imperious gaze was unwavering, her silver hair gleaming under the chandelier. Victor Grange, his ruddy face flushed from lack of sleep, shifted uncomfortably in his armchair. Mr. Percival Holt, the lawyer, clutched his briefcase, his spectacles reflecting the light. Miss Evelyn Ward twisted a handkerchief, her usual vivacity subdued. Mr. Collins, the butler, stood by the door, his expression impassive but his hands betraying a slight tremor. Inspector Japp leaned against the fireplace, his notebook open, his mustache twitching with impatience. "Monsieur Poirot," Japp said, his voice gruff, "you've got us all here, staring at that glove like it's the crown jewels. What's it mean, and what's next?" Poirot's green eyes gleamed, his mustache curling with a faint smile. "Inspector, this glove, it is a clue most intriguing. Left on the dining table, cleared by Monsieur Collins, stained with ink. It tells a story, oui? But whose story? That is what we must discover." He turned to the group, his voice clear and deliberate. "Mesdames et messieurs, the murder of Sir Reginald Harrow is a puzzle of many pieces. The locked room, the burned letter, the thread, the jasmine scent, and now, this glove. Each of you has a secret, a motive, and we shall uncover them all. Let us begin with the glove." He held it higher, his gaze sweeping the room. It was on the table at dinner, near Mademoiselle Clara's place. Yet none claim it. Mademoiselle Clara, Mademoiselle Ward, Madame Beatrice. Its size suggests a woman's hand. "Who does it belong to?" Clara shook her head, her voice soft. "It's not mine, Monsieur Poirot. I wore no gloves last night." Evelyn nodded, her curls bouncing slightly. "Mine were blue, as I said. I left them in my room before dinner." "Lady," Beatrice's lips pursed. "I have no use for such things. It's not mine." Poirot's eyes narrowed, his tone deceptively mild. "Then we have a glove that belongs to no one, yet was seen by all. Curious, no? And now, it is stained with ink, perhaps from the desk, where Sir Reginald was murdered. This suggests it was handled after dinner, perhaps by the killer, to avoid leaving fingerprints on the letter opener." A murmur rippled through the group. Lionel's hand tightened on Clara's, and Grange's brandy glass wobbled in his grip. Holt adjusted his spectacles, his fingers restless. Collins's face remained impassive, but his eyes flickered to the glove. A fleeting moment Poirot did not miss. "Collins," Poirot said, turning to the butler, "you cleared the table. You said the glove was taken to the laundry, yet it bears a fresh stain. Did you notice anything unusual when you handled it?" Collins straightened, his voice steady but strained. "No, sir. I cleared the linens as usual. The glove was among them, and I placed it with the others for washing." "And yet," Poirot said, "it is here, not washed. You brought it to me this morning. Why was it not laundered immediately?" Collins hesitated, his composure faltering. I was distracted, sir, with the commotion after the scream. I set it aside in the kitchen." Poirot nodded, filing away the butler's unease. He turned to Japp. "Inspector, I suggest we examine the laundry area. The glove's journey. It may tell us more." Japp grunted, scribbling in his notebook. "Right, I'll have my men check it. But what's your angle, Poirot? You think the glove was used in the murder?" "Perhaps," Poirot said. "Or perhaps it was left to mislead. The killer, they are clever, weaving a web of deception. But Poirot, he sees through such webs." He paced the room, his polished shoes silent on the Persian rug, his mind racing. The glove was a focal point, its presence at dinner and absence in the study, a deliberate act. The ink stain suggested it had been near the desk, perhaps used to handle the letter opener, avoiding fingerprints. But why leave it at the table in the first place? A mistake, or a calculated move to implicate someone else? The green thread, on the window latch matching Clara's shawl, pointed to her, yet the glove size could also fit Evelyn or Lady Beatrice. And the jasmine scent. Evelyn's perfume was similar, but was it too obvious? Poirot turned to Clara, his tone gentle. "Mademoiselle, you were close to your father. Did he speak of enemies, of threats in the days before his death?" Clara's eyes filled with tears. "He was distant lately. He mentioned a letter, something that upset him, but he wouldn't say more. He was worried about the business, about Mr. Grange's plans." Grange sputtered, his face reddening. "Now see here, Reginald and I had our differences, but I'd never harm him. That factory deal was sound. High risk, yes, but profitable. He was too cautious, that's all." Poirot's gaze shifted to Grange. "Monsieur, your venture, was it entirely honest? Or did Sir Reginald suspect something untoward?" Grange's eyes widened, and he took a swig of brandy. "Untoward? That's nonsense. We were partners, equals. He trusted me." Lady Beatrice snorted, her voice dripping with disdain. "Trusted you? Reginald was no fool, Victor. He knew you were reckless, gambling with his fortune. If anyone had reason to silence him, it was you." Grange shot to his feet, his voice booming. "That's enough, Beatrice. You've always hated me, haven't you? Jealous of my place in Reginald's life. Enough!" Poirot's voice cut through the argument, sharp and commanding. "We are not here to throw accusations like stones. We seek the truth. Monsieur Grange, sit. Madame Beatrice, your suspicions are noted. Now let us proceed." He turned to Holt, who sat silently, his briefcase a barrier between him and the room. "Monsieur Holt, this codicil you mentioned, it concerns a family matter, something that might affect Mademoiselle, Clara's inheritance?" Holt's fingers tightened on his briefcase, his voice low. "It's confidential, Monsieur Poirot. Sir Reginald was concerned about legitimacy, about certain claims from the past. I cannot say more." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Legitimacy? A most interesting word. We shall return to it." He moved to Evelyn, who looked up with wide, anxious eyes. "Mademoiselle Ward, your debt to Sir Reginald, how large was it, and how did you plan to repay it?" Evelyn blushed, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was substantial. A business venture, a boutique in London that failed. Sir Reginald was kind, gave me time, but I was to repay him by next month. I was selling some jewelry to cover it." Poirot nodded, his mind noting the connection to jewelry. Could the jasmine scent be hers, used to mislead? He turned to Lionel. "Monsieur Drake, your debts. How desperate were they? Did Sir Reginald threaten to end your engagement if you did not clear them?" Lionel's face hardened, but his voice was steady. "They're manageable. I've made arrangements. Sir Reginald was upset, yes, but he agreed to give me time. I loved Clara, still do. I'd never harm her father." Poirot's gaze lingered, sensing truth mingled with evasion. He returned to the glove, turning it over in his hands. "This glove," he said, "it is small, delicate. It fits a woman's hand, yet none claim it. Let us try an experiment. Mademoiselle Clara, would you try it on?" Clara hesitated, then took the glove, slipping it onto her hand. It fit perfectly, her fingers aligning with the embroidered edges. A gasp rippled through the room, and Clara's eyes widened. "It's not mine," she insisted, pulling it off. "I swear it." Poirot nodded, unfazed. "Mademoiselle Ward, if you please." Evelyn complied, her hand trembling as she donned the glove. It fit her as well, though slightly looser. Lady Beatrice declined to try it, her refusal sharp. "I've told you it's not mine. This is absurd." Poirot smiled faintly. "Absurd perhaps, but revealing. The glove, it fits more than one, yet belongs to none. A clue or a distraction?" We shall see. Jap, growing restless, interrupted. Poirot, we've got the glove, the thread, the letter. What's next? My men found nothing on the grounds, no signs of a break-in. The killer's in this house, I'd wager. Oui, Inspector, Poirot said. The killer is here and… The glove, it is a key. I propose we search the rooms with your permission to find any trace of its pair or other clues. The guests protested, but Jap agreed, organizing his constables to conduct a discreet search. Poirot joined them, his eyes scanning every detail as they moved through the manor's corridors. In Clara's room, they found her green shawl, its threads matching the one on the window latch, but no gloves. Evelyn's room held her blue gloves, as she'd claimed, and a bottle of jasmine perfume, its scent a close match to the study's. Lady Beatrice's room was austere, with no gloves or perfume. Grange's room was cluttered, reeking of brandy, but held no clues. Holt's briefcase yielded only legal documents, though Poirot noted a sealed envelope marked confidential. Collins's quarters were sparse, but a small locked box caught Poirot's eye, locked and unopened. The search yielded no second glove, deepening the mystery. Poirot returned to the drawing room, his mind weaving the clues together. The glove, the thread, the perfume, the codicil, the burned letter. Each suspect had a motive. Clara's inheritance, Lionel's H. Chapter 7. The burned letter. The library of Ashwood Manor was a sanctuary of knowledge, its high ceilings adorned with intricate plasterwork and its walls lined with towering bookshelves filled with leather-bound tomes. The air carried the musty scent of old paper, mingling with the faint tang of wood smoke from the fireplace where embers glowed softly in the late afternoon light. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the room, his small, immaculate figure dwarfed by the grandeur around him, yet radiating an authority that commanded attention. In his hand, he held the small envelope containing the charred fragments of the letter retrieved from Sir Reginald Harrow's study, its cryptic words: betrayal, cannot forgive, consequences. A tantalizing clue in the puzzle of the industrialist's murder. Captain Hastings sat at a nearby table, his notebook open, his pen poised as he watched Poirot with a mixture of admiration and impatience. Inspector Jap, his stocky frame slouched in an armchair, rubbed his temples, his bristling mustache twitching as he grappled with the complexities of the case. Poirot, Jap said, his voice heavy with frustration. We've got a locked room, a missing glove, a thread, a whiff of perfume, and now these bits of burned paper. You're making a mountain out of a molehill with this letter. It could be anything, a business note, a personal grudge. What's your angle? Poirot's green eyes gleamed, his mustache curling with a faint smile. Inspector, the mountain, as you call it, is the truth, and every clue, no matter how small, is a foothold. This letter, it is not anything. It speaks of betrayal, of consequences. It was burned to hide its contents, yet not entirely destroyed. The killer, they were hasty, or perhaps interrupted. And Poirot, he will uncover what they sought to conceal. He opened the envelope, carefully spreading the fragments on the table, their edges blackened but the ink still legible in places. The handwriting was elegant, with a slight flourish, suggesting a person of refinement or one mimicking such. Poirot leaned closer, his tweezers poised, arranging the pieces like a jigsaw puzzle. Observe, Hastings, he said, his voice low but intense. The paper, it is of fine quality, the kind used for formal correspondence. The words, they are personal, emotional. This was no business note but a message of the heart, or of vengeance. Hastings peered over his shoulder, frowning. Betrayal. Consequences. Sounds like someone was angry with Sir Reginald, but who? And why burn it? Exactement, Poirot said, his eyes never leaving the fragments. The burning, it is an act of concealment, but also of panic. The killer wished to destroy evidence, yet left enough for us to find. Why? Perhaps to mislead, or perhaps because they were disturbed. We must reconstruct this letter and discover its author. He turned to Jap, who was watching skeptically. Inspector, I require your assistance. Send for a magnifying glass and a sheet of tracing paper. We shall attempt to piece together the letter, and perhaps uncover more of its message. Jap sighed but nodded. dispatching a constable to fetch the items. While they waited, Poirot paced the library, his polished shoes silent on the thick rug, his mind racing. The burned letter was a pivotal clue, its words pointing to a motive rooted in personal betrayal. Sir Reginald's announcement about revising, his will at dinner had stirred tensions, suggesting inheritance as a possible trigger. But the letter's tone hinted at something deeper, a wound older than business disputes, perhaps tied to the family secrets Mr. Holt, the lawyer, had alluded to. The green thread on the window latch matching Clara Harrow's shawl, and the jasmine scent reminiscent of Evelyn Ward's perfume, were other threads in the tapestry. But the letter, Poirot felt, was the key to unraveling the killer's identity. Though our constable returned with a magnifying glass and tracing paper, and Poirot set to work, his movements precise and methodical. He arranged the fragments under the glass, noting the alignment of letters, the faint smudges of ink. Some pieces were too charred to read, but others yielded more. Your actions. Trust broken. Must pay. The phrases were disjointed, yet their intent was clear, an accusation, a demand for justice. Hastings, Poirot said, beckoning his friend, what do you make of these words? They are not the language of a casual disagreement, no? Hastings scratched his chin, his honest face puzzled. Sounds like someone felt deeply wronged. Maybe a family member or a close friend. Could it be Clara, upset about the will? Poirot shook his head. Mademoiselle Clara. She is grieved, yes, but her love for her father, it seems genuine. The thread implicates her, but it is too convenient. Perhaps a plant. No, this letter, it suggests a deeper betrayal, one that festers over time. Japp leaned forward, his interest piqued. You think it's tied to that codicil Holt mentioned? Something about inheritance, legitimacy? Perhaps, Poirot said, his tone cautious. Monsieur Holt guards his secrets closely, but we shall pry them loose. For now, let us consider the letter's physical state. The ink, it is smudged, suggesting haste. The burning, it was incomplete, suggesting interruption. And the handwriting, it is not Sir Reginald's, I am certain, for I saw his signature on the invitation to Ashwood. We must compare it to the guest's writing. He turned to the door, where Mr. Collins, the butler, stood silently, his presence almost forgotten. Monsieur Collins, you brought Sir Reginald a brandy at 10 o'clock, oui? Did you see him writing or receiving a letter? Collins's face remained impassive, but his hands clasped tightly behind his back. He was at his desk, sir, writing something. I didn't see a letter, but he was agitated, as I said. He dismissed me quickly. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And this agitation, did he mention its cause? No, sir, Collins replied, his voice steady but his eyes flickering. He only said he needed to work. Poirot nodded, dismissing the butler but noting his unease. Collins' access to the study, his handling of the glove, and his nervous demeanor made him a figure of interest. The glove, Poirot recalled, had reappeared with an ink stain, suggesting it had been near the desk, perhaps used to handle the letter opener, avoiding fingerprints. But its initial placement at the dining table was puzzling. A mistake or a deliberate act to implicate someone. He returned to the letter, his fingers tracing the fragments. We must gather samples of the guest's handwriting, he said to Japp. A simple request, a note, a signature. The killer, they may have written this letter or received it. Either way, it is a clue to their identity. Japp agreed, and Poirot drafted a polite request for each guest to provide a writing sample, citing it as a routine part of the investigation. The guests, summoned to the library, complied with varying degrees of reluctance. Clara's hand trembled as she wrote, her script neat but hesitant. Lionel's was bold, almost aggressive, his pen pressing hard into the paper. Lady Beatrice's was precise, her flourishes mirroring the letter's style, though not exactly. Victor Grange's was scrawled, barely legible, his impatience evident. Holt's was meticulous, each letter perfectly formed but lacking the letter's emotional flourish. Evelyn's was light and flowing, with a hint of similarity to the letter, though her nervous glances suggested fear rather than guilt. Collins, when asked, provided a sample that was formal and controlled, but his hand shook slightly, a detail Poirot noted. As the samples were collected, Poirot examined them under the magnifying glass, comparing them to the letter's fragments. None were an exact match, but Evelyn's and Lady Beatrice's bore the closest resemblance, their flourishes suggesting a similar hand. Yet Poirot knew handwriting could be disguised, and the letter's emotional tone did not align with Lady Beatrice's cold demeanor or Evelyn's anxious loyalty to Clara. "Hastings," he said, "the letter, it is a cry of pain but also a trap. The killer, they wish us to focus on it, to suspect those closest to Sir Reginald. But Poirot, he looks beyond the obvious." He moved to the fireplace, where the ashes of the letter had been found. The grate was cold now, but he sifted through, the remaining ash finding a tiny scrap of paper missed earlier, bearing a single word, "You." It was a small addition, but it reinforced the letter's accusatory tone. He pocketed it, his mind turning to the jasmine scent. Evelyn's perfume was a close match, but its presence in the study could be a deliberate plant, meant to frame her. The green thread, too, pointed to Clara, yet its placement on the window latch seemed too perfect, as though staged. Poirot's thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. A constable entered holding a small leather-bound book. "Found this in the study, sir," he said, addressing Jap. "Tucked behind a shelf, like it was hidden." Poirot took the book, his fingers brushing its worn cover. It was a journal, its pages filled with Sir Reginald's precise handwriting. He flipped through it, noting entries about business deals, family matters, and in the final pages a cryptic note. "Must confront V about the funds. Cannot trust him. And the other matter, too painful to write." The initial V suggested Victor Grange, and the other matter hinted at the codicil Holt had mentioned. "This journal," Poirot said, his voice low, "it is a window into Sir Reginald's mind. He suspected betrayal, not only in business but in his personal life. We must question Monsieur Grange again and Monsieur Holt. The codicil, it holds a secret that may unlock this mystery." Jap nodded, summoning Grange and Holt to the library. Grange arrived first, his bluster diminished, his eyes wary. "What now, Poirot? More accusations?" Chapter 8. Alibis Unravel. The late afternoon sun cast a muted glow through the leaded windows of Ashwood Manor's drawing room, its light filtering through heavy velvet curtains to create a patchwork of shadows across the polished oak floor. The air was thick with tension, a palpable weight that seemed to press upon the gathered guests, their faces drawn with fatigue and suspicion. Hercule Poirot stood near the grand fireplace, its embers glowing faintly, his small, immaculate figure a beacon of calm amidst the storm of unease. His green eyes, sharp and unyielding, swept over the assembled group, cataloging every gesture, every fleeting expression. Captain Hastings sat at a small writing desk, his notebook filled with scribbled observations, his brow furrowed as he tried to keep pace with Poirot's relentless deductions. Inspector Japp paced near the window, his stocky frame restless, his bristling mustache twitching as he muttered about the case's complexities. The murder of Sir Reginald Harrow had transformed the manor into a crucible of secrets, and Poirot knew that the key to unraveling the mystery lay in the alibis of those now before him. Clara Harrow, her auburn hair loosely pinned, sat with her hands clasped tightly, her tear-streaked face pale under the lamplight. Captain Lionel Drake, her fiancé, maintained a protective stance beside her, his military bearing strained, his eyes darting with barely concealed agitation. Lady Beatrice Harrow, regal in her black morning gown, sat erect, her silver hair gleaming, her gaze cold and imperious. Victor Grange, Sir Reginald's business partner, slumped in an armchair, his ruddy face flushed from brandy and lack of sleep, his fingers fidgeting with a glass. Mr. Percival Holt, the lawyer, clutched his briefcase, his thin frame hunched, his spectacles catching the light as he avoided eye contact. Miss Evelyn Ward, Clara's friend, twisted a handkerchief, her blue eyes wide with anxiety, her usual vivacity dimmed. Mr. Collins, the butler, stood by the sideboard, his posture stiff, his face a mask of professional detachment, though his hands betrayed a slight tremor as he poured tea. "Monsieur Poirot," Japp said, his voice heavy with impatience. "We've got a house full of suspects, each with a story, and none of them quite adding up. The glove, the letter, the thread, the perfume, it's a tangle. Where do we go from here?" Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile, his voice clear and precise. "Inspector, the tangle. It is but a knot to be undone with method and logic. The alibis, they are the threads we must test, for one will snap under scrutiny. The killer, they have woven a web of deception, but Poirot, he will find the flaw. Let us begin." He turned to the group, his presence commanding silence. "Mesdames et messieurs, Sir Reginald Harrow was murdered in a locked room, stabbed with his own letter opener, a letter burned, a thread left on the window latch, a glove misplaced. Each of you claims to have been elsewhere when the scream was heard at midnight. We shall now examine these claims, for the truth, it hides in the details." He began with Clara, his tone gentle but probing. "Mademoiselle Clara, you said you were in your room, reading, when the scream was heard. Who can confirm this?" Clara's voice trembled, her eyes fixed on her hands. "Evelyn was with me earlier, but she'd left to get a book. I was alone when I heard the scream, and I ran to the hall." Poirot nodded, his eyes narrowing. "And your maid, she did not see you?" Clara hesitated, her fingers tightening on her handkerchief. I sent her to bed earlier. I wanted privacy." "Privacy?" Poirot repeated, his tone neutral but his mind alert. He turned to Evelyn. "Mademoiselle Ward, you left Mademoiselle Clara's room to fetch a book, oui? What book, and where is it now?" Evelyn's cheeks flushed, her voice soft. "It was a novel, Jane Eyre. I left it in my room after the scream. I didn't think to bring it." Poirot's gaze lingered, noting her nervousness. "And you heard the scream from your room, which is near the study, non? Did you see anyone in the corridor?" Evelyn shook her head. "No, I just ran out and saw Clara and the others." Poirot turned to Lionel, his tone sharpening. "Monsieur Drake, you were in the garden smoking, you said. Yet Inspector Japp's men found no footprints in the damp grass, and your shoes, they bear traces of mud. Explain this discrepancy." Lionel's jaw tightened, his voice firm but strained. "I was in the garden near the arbor. The path there is gravel, not grass. The mud must have come from earlier, when I walked by the fountain." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Gravel, you say? We shall verify this. And your cigarette? Where is the stub?" Lionel hesitated, his hand brushing his pocket. "I tossed it away. Didn't think it mattered." "Everything matters," Poirot said softly, his gaze piercing. He moved to Lady Beatrice, whose imperious demeanor remained unshaken. "Madame, you heard a noise but stayed in your room, which overlooks the study. Did you see or hear anything unusual before the scream?" Lady Beatrice's lips pursed, her voice cold. "I heard footsteps perhaps around 10:30. I thought it was Reginald working late. I saw nothing from my window. The curtains were drawn." Poirot nodded, noting the specificity of the time. He turned to Grange, whose brandy glass was now empty. "Monsieur Grange, you were in the library, you claim. What were you reading?" Grange shifted, his voice gruff. "Some business reports about the Birmingham factory. I needed to review them." "And these reports," Poirot said. "They are still there?" Grange nodded, but his eyes flickered. "Should be. Left them on the table." Poirot made a mental note to check the library. He turned to Holt, whose silence was conspicuous. "Monsieur Holt, you were working in your room. On what, precisely?" Holt adjusted his spectacles, his voice low. "Legal documents for Sir Reginald's will revision. I was drafting notes for the codicil." "And these notes," Poirot said, "they are in your briefcase?" Holt nodded, clutching it tighter. "Yes, but they're confidential." Poirot's smile was thin. "Confidentiality, monsieur, does not shield a murderer. We shall see these notes in time." Finally, he turned to Collins, whose composure was fraying at the edges. "Monsieur Collins, you were in the kitchen, overseeing the staff. Can they confirm this?" Collins' hands clasped behind his back, his voice steady but his eyes uneasy. "Yes, sir. The cook and maid were with me preparing for breakfast. And the glove, Poirot said, producing it from his pocket. You cleared it from the table. Did you notice its stain or anything else unusual? Collins swallowed, his gaze fixed on the glove. No, sir. It was just among the linens. Poirot's eyes narrowed, sensing evasion. He turned to Jap. Inspector, we must verify these alibis, the garden path, the library reports, the kitchen staff, the documents in Monsieur Holt's briefcase, and we must examine the study clock. It is 5 minutes slow, a detail most curious. Jap raised an eyebrow. The clock? You think it's significant? Oui, Poirot said. A clock that is slow. It alters the timeline of the crime. Was it tampered with to confuse us, or was it merely neglected? We shall see. Jap organized his constables to check the alibis, while Poirot led Hastings to the study to examine the clock. The room was as they had left it, Sir Reginald's body now covered with a sheet, the letter opener removed for evidence. The clock, a heavy mahogany piece on the mantel, ticked softly, its hands showing 5 minutes behind the manor's other clocks. Poirot inspected it, noting a faint scratch near the winding mechanism, suggesting recent tampering. Hastings, he said. This clock, it was altered, perhaps to make the murder appear earlier or later than it was. The killer, they are meticulous, yet they leave traces. They moved to the garden, where the gravel path near the arbor showed no signs of Lionel's presence, but the mud near the fountain matched his shoes. In the library, the reports Grange claimed to have read were untouched, their pages crisp, suggesting he had lied. The kitchen staff confirmed Collins's presence, but their accounts were vague, leaving room for doubt. Holt's briefcase, when opened under Jap's insistence, revealed notes about the codicil, hinting at Clara's legitimacy but offering no clear motive for murder. Poirot's mind raced, weaving the clues together. The glove, stained with ink, suggested use in the murder. The thread implicated Clara. The jasmine scent pointed to Evelyn. The burned letter spoke of betrayal. The slow clock altered the timeline. Each alibi had cracks. Lionel's missing cigarette stub, Grange's untouched reports, Clara's unconfirmed, solitude, Evelyn's convenient timing, Lady Beatrice's footsteps, Holt's secrecy, Collins's nervousness. The killer, Poirot knew, was among them, their alibi a fragile facade. As evening fell, Poirot stood by the drawing-room window, the glove in his pocket, the letter's fragments in his mind. The alibis were unraveling, each revealing a motive, debts, inheritance, business secrets. The clock's tampering suggested a planned deception, but by whom? The shadow of murder loomed larger, and Poirot's little. Chapter 9. The Hidden Clue. The twilight cast a soft, melancholic glow over Ashwood Manor, its golden hues filtering through the tall windows of the study where Hercule Poirot stood, his small, immaculate figure silhouetted against the fading light. The room, still marked by the tragedy of Sir Reginald Harrow's murder, was a silent witness to the secrets it held. Scattered papers, an overturned chair, the faint smudge of ink on the desk, and the lingering scent of jasmine that clung to the air like a ghostly memory. Poirot's green eyes, sharp and unrelenting, scanned the scene with the precision of a master painter assessing his canvas, each detail a brushstroke in the intricate portrait of the crime. Captain Hastings hovered near the door, his notebook clutched tightly, his honest face etched with a mixture of awe and impatience as he watched his friend work. Inspector Jap, his stocky frame leaning against the mantel, rubbed his bristling mustache, his frustration palpable after hours of fruitless searching and questioning. Poirot, Jap said, his voice gruff with exasperation. We've turned this place upside down, checked alibis, searched rooms, examined that blasted glove, the letter, the thread, and even the clock. We're no closer to nabbing the killer. What's your next move? Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile, his voice calm but resolute. Inspector, the truth. It is like a pearl hidden in the oyster. It requires patience, precision, to uncover. We have many clues, but one small detail has eluded us. And Poirot, he has found it. Hastings' eyes widened, his pen pausing mid-scribble. Found it? What, Poirot? Another thread? A fingerprint? Poirot raised a hand, his expression enigmatic. Patience, mon ami. Let us examine the study, once more, with fresh eyes. The killer, they are clever, but even the cleverest leave a trace. And this trace, it is here, waiting for us. He moved to the desk, his polished shoes silent on the Persian rug, and knelt beside it, his gaze fixed. On the floor, the constables had swept the room. Japp's men had catalogued every item, but Poirot's method was different. Methodical, intuitive, driven by the belief that the smallest detail could unravel the greatest mystery. His fingers brushed the rug, then paused, his eyes narrowing as he spotted something. A glint, barely visible, tucked beneath the desk's carved leg. He reached for it, his tweezers poised, and extracted a single pearl earring, its luster dulled by dust but unmistakable in its elegance. "Voilà!" Poirot exclaimed, holding the earring aloft, its pearl catching the lamplight. "This, mes amis, is the hidden clue, a pearl earring lost in the chaos of murder, overlooked by all but Hercule Poirot." Japp stepped forward, his skepticism evident. "An earring? Could belong to anyone, Poirot. One of the maids, maybe, or Clara, or Miss Ward. How's it a clue?" Poirot's eyes gleamed, his voice low and intense. "Inspector, this earring, it is not anyone's. It is specific, unique. I recall Mademoiselle Evelyn Ward wearing a pair like this at dinner, with her pink dress. Yet she claimed to have lost one earlier that day. If this is hers, it places her in the study at the time of the murder, or it suggests someone wished to make us believe she was here." Hastings gasped, his notebook forgotten. "Good Lord, Poirot, you think Evelyn's the killer? Or someone's framing her?" Poirot shook his head, his tone cautious. "We do not leap to conclusions, Hastings. The earring, it is a fact, and facts they must be tested. We shall question Mademoiselle Ward, and we shall observe her reaction. But first let us consider the scene." He paced the room, the earring in his pocket, his mind weaving together the clues. The locked door, the burned letter, the green thread, the jasmine scent, the ink-stained glove, the tampered clock, and, now, the pearl earring. The study was a locked room, its door secured from the inside, the window too narrow for entry, yet Sir Reginald was dead, stabbed with his own letter opener. The earring suggested a woman's presence. Evelyn, perhaps, or someone using her jewelry to mislead. The thread, matching Clara's shawl, pointed to her, but its placement seemed staged. The jasmine scent, close to Evelyn's perfume, could be a deliberate plant. The glove, fitting both Clara and Evelyn, was another misdirection, its ink stain, tying it to the desk. The letter's talk of betrayal hinted at a personal motive, and the clock, 5 minutes slow, suggested a manipulated timeline. Poirot returned to the desk, his fingers brushing the scratch he had noted earlier, a fresh mark possibly from a key or tool. He examined the letter opener's position, now in Japp's evidence bag, and recalled its precise angle, suggesting a strong, deliberate thrust. The burned letter, its fragments pieced together, spoke of betrayal and consequences, but its handwriting matched none of the guest samples exactly, though Evelyn's and Lady Beatrice's were close. The journal, found behind a shelf, had revealed Sir Reginald's suspicions about Victor Grange's finances and a mysterious other matter, likely the codicil about Clara's legitimacy. "Inspector," Poirot said, turning to Japp, "we must bring Mademoiselle Ward here to the study. I wish to see her reaction to the earring and to ask about her movements last night." Japp nodded, dispatching a constable to fetch Evelyn. While they waited, Poirot moved to the fireplace where the letter's ashes had been found. He sifted through the grate, finding no further fragments, but the act of burning intrigued him. Why burn the letter, yet leave it partially intact? Was it haste or a calculated move to draw attention? He recalled Collins's agitation when questioned about the glove, and Holt's secrecy about the codicil. Each suspect had a motive. Clara's inheritance, Lionel's debts, Grange's embezzlement, Evelyn's loan, Holt's knowledge, Collins's access, Lady Beatrice's family honor. Evelyn arrived, her blue eyes wide with apprehension, her pink dress replaced by a simple gray one. Her curls pinned loosely, she hesitated at the door, glancing at the covered body, her hand trembling. "Monsieur Poirot, you wanted to see me?" "Oui, mademoiselle," Poirot said, his tone gentle but probing. "A matter of jewelry. You wore pearl earrings at dinner, none? You said you lost one earlier that day. Can you describe it?" Evelyn's cheeks flushed, her voice soft. "They were small, with a single pearl, silver setting. I lost the left one in the garden, I think, when I was walking with Clara." Poirot produced the earring, holding it up. "Is this it, mademoiselle?" Evelyn gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Yes, it looks like mine. But where did you find it?" "Here," Poirot said, gesturing to the desk. "Beneath the desk where Sir Reginald was murdered. Can you explain this?" Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking. "I don't know. I wasn't here, I swear. I lost it in the garden, or maybe someone took it. I'd never hurt Sir Reginald." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting, though his tone softened. "Mademoiselle, your perfume, it is jasmine, oui? The study carried this scent last night. And the glove, it fits your hand. These are many coincidences, no?" Evelyn shook her head, sobbing. "It's not me. Someone's trying to make it look like I did it. I owed Sir Reginald money, yes, but he was kind to me. I'd never—" Poirot raised a hand, silencing her. "Calm yourself, mademoiselle. We seek the truth, not accusations. You may go, but we will speak again." As Evelyn left, Japp muttered, "She's either a fine actress or genuinely terrified. What do you make of it, Poirot?" "The earring," Poirot said. "It is a clue, but also a trap. It points to Mademoiselle Ward, yet its discovery feels too convenient. The killer, they wish us to suspect her, or perhaps Mademoiselle Clara, with the thread. We must test this further." He turned to Hastings. "Mon ami, fetch the other guests. I wish to observe their reactions to the earring and to question them about their movements after dinner." Hastings complied, and soon the drawing room was filled again, the guests' faces a mixture of dread and defiance. Poirot held up the earring, describing its discovery without mentioning Evelyn's name. Clara's eyes widened, her hand touching her own ears, bare of jewelry. Lionel's jaw tightened, his gaze flicking to Clara. Lady Beatrice's lips pursed, her expression unreadable. Grange's brandy glass paused mid-sip, his eyes narrowing. Holt adjusted his spectacles, his fingers restless. Collins, serving tea, froze momentarily, his tray wobbling. "This earring," Poirot said, "was found in the study near the desk. Does anyone recognize it?" A tense silence followed. Clara shook her head, her voice soft. "I don't wear pearls. It's not mine." Lionel nodded. "Never seen it before." Lady Beatrice sniffed. "Common enough design. Could belong to anyone." Grange shrugged, his voice slurred. "Looks like something Evelyn might wear." Holt remained silent, his eyes fixed on his briefcase. Collins, when prompted, said, "I've not seen it, sir." Poirot's smile was thin. "Interesting that no one claims it, yet it was here. We shall keep it in mind." He shifted focus, questioning their movements after dinner. Clara reiterated her solitude, Lionel his garden walk, Lady Beatrice her room, Grange the library, Holt his documents, Evelyn her book, Collins the kitchen. Each alibi had been tested, and each had flaws. Lionel's missing cigarette stub, Grange's untouched reports, Clara's unconfirmed solitude, Evelyn's convenient scream, Lady Beatrice's footsteps, Holt's secrecy, Collins's glove handling. The earring added another layer, its presence tying to Evelyn but possibly planted to mislead. Poirot moved among the guests, his questions precise, his observations acute. He noted Clara's nervous glances at Lionel, Lionel's protective stance, Lady Beatrice's sharp eyes. Grange. Chapter 10. The Business Deal. The grand library of Ashwood Manor was bathed in the soft glow of gas lamps, their flickering light casting intricate shadows across the towering bookshelves and the polished mahogany table at the room's center. The air was heavy with the scent of old leather and wax, a fitting backdrop for the weighty secrets that hung over the gathered guests. Hercule Poirot stood by the table, his small, immaculate figure radiating an air of quiet authority, his green eyes sharp as they surveyed the suspects seated before him. Captain Hastings sat to his right, his notebook filled with pages of hurried scribbles, his honest face etched with a mix of curiosity and fatigue. Inspector Japp leaned against a bookshelf, his stocky frame restless, his bristling mustache twitching, as he grappled with the mounting complexities of Sir Reginald Harrow's murder. The guests, their faces drawn from sleeplessness and suspicion, sat in a tense semicircle. Clara Harrow, her auburn hair loosely pinned, clutched a handkerchief, her eyes red from tears. Captain Lionel Drake, her fiancé, sat protectively beside her, his military posture rigid, though his hands betrayed a slight tremor. Lady Beatrice Harrow, her silver hair gleaming under the lamplight, maintained an imperious demeanor, her black morning gown a stark contrast to the room's warmth. Victor Grange, Sir Reginald's business partner, slumped in an armchair, his ruddy face flushed from brandy, his fingers fidgeting with an empty glass. Mr. Percival Holt, the lawyer, held his briefcase like a shield, his spectacles catching the light as he avoided eye contact. Miss Evelyn Ward, Clara's friend, twisted a silk scarf, her blue eyes wide with anxiety, her usual vivacity subdued. Mr. Collins, the butler, stood by the door, his posture stiff, his face a mask of professional calm, though his hands clasped tightly behind his back. Monsieur Poirot, Japp said, his voice laced with impatience. We've got a locked room, a glove, a thread, a burned letter, a pearl earring, and a clock that's off by 5 minutes. Now you're harping on about this business deal of Grange's. What's it got to do with the murder? Let's get to the point. Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile, his voice calm but resolute. Inspector, the point, it is the truth. And the truth, it is woven from many threads. The business deal of Monsieur Grange, it is a thread most significant, for it speaks of motive, greed, betrayal, desperation. We shall unravel it, and in doing so, draw closer to the killer. He turned to the group, his presence commanding. Silence. Mesdames et messieurs, Sir Reginald Harrow was murdered in his study, a room locked from within, stabbed with his own letter opener. We have clues: the glove, the thread, the jasmine scent, the burned letter, the earring, the tampered clock. But we also have motives, and one lies in the business dealings of Monsieur Victor Grange. Let us explore this, we? He fixed his gaze on Grange, whose face paled, his brandy glass wobbling in his hand. Monsieur Grange, Sir Reginald's journal mentioned a confrontation with V about funds. You are his partner, none? Tell us of this Birmingham factory deal and why it caused such discord. Grange shifted uncomfortably, his voice gruff. It's no secret, Poirot. Reginald and I were building a steel factory. High risk, high reward. He got cold feet, thought it was too speculative. We argued, sure, but it was business. Nothing more. Poirot's eyes narrowed, his tone deceptively mild. Business, monsieur? Yet Sir Reginald wrote of missing funds, of trust broken. Did you perhaps redirect money from the partnership without his knowledge? A murmur rippled through the room. Clara's eyes widened and Lionel's hand tightened on hers. Lady Beatrice's lips pursed, her gaze sharp as a blade. Holt adjusted his spectacles, his fingers restless. Evelyn glanced at Grange, her expression uneasy. Collins remained still, though his eyes flickered to the floor. Grange's face reddened, his voice rising. That's nonsense. I'd never steal from Reginald. Yes, I moved some funds to cover short-term debts, that's all. I was going to repay it. He overreacted, that's all. Poirot leaned forward, his voice cutting through Grange's bluster. Overreacted, monsieur? Or did he threaten to expose you, to ruin you? A man of Sir Reginald's stature, discovering his partner's dishonesty. Such a threat could drive a desperate man to desperate acts. Grange shot to his feet, his glass crashing to the floor. "You're accusing me of murder? I won't stand for this. Reginald was my friend." "Sit, monsieur," Poirot said, his tone icy. "We do not accuse, we inquire, but your alibi, it is weak. You claim you were in the library, reading reports, yet those reports were untouched. Explain this." Grange sank back into his chair, his bravado fading. I meant to read them, but I was distracted, thinking about the deal, about Reginald's stubbornness. I didn't touch the papers, that's all." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloging the admission. He turned to the group, his voice steady. "The business deal, it is a motive, but not the only one. Let us revisit the clues, for they are connected. The glove, stained with ink, suggests it was used to handle the letter opener, avoiding fingerprints. The thread, matching Mademoiselle Clara's shawl, points to her, yet seems planted. The jasmine scent, like Mademoiselle Ward's perfume, could be a frame. The burned letter speaks of betrayal, perhaps tied to this deal. The earring, found under the desk, implicates Mademoiselle Ward, yet may be a misdirection. And the clock, 5 minutes slow, alters our timeline." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. Monsieur Grange's dishonesty gives him motive, but others have secrets. Mademoiselle Clara, your father's will. Did he share its details with you? Clara's voice trembled, her eyes fixed on her hands. He said he wanted to protect me, to ensure I'd have Ashwood. But he was worried about my mother, about rumors from long ago. Poirot's eyes gleamed, recalling Holt's mention of the codicil. He turned to the lawyer. "Monsieur Holt, this codicil, it concerns Mademoiselle Clara's legitimacy." "Oui? Did Sir Reginald suspect she was not his daughter?" Holt's fingers tightened on his briefcase, his voice low. He had doubts based on old letters from his wife. He wanted to investigate, to protect Clara's inheritance, but also to know the truth. A gasp escaped Evelyn, and Clara's face paled further. Lionel's jaw tightened, his hand gripping hers. Lady Beatrice's expression hardened, her voice sharp. "Those rumors are nonsense, Monsieur Poirot. My brother was sentimental, clinging to old wounds. Clara is a hero, and no one can dispute that." Poirot nodded, filing away her defensiveness. He turned to Evelyn. "Mademoiselle Ward, your debt to Sir Reginald, how desperate were you to repay it? And your earring found in the study, how did it come to be there?" Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking. "I told you I lost it in the garden. I owed him money. Yes, but I was selling jewelry to cover it. I wasn't in the study, I swear." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting, though his tone softened. "And your perfume, mademoiselle. It matches the scent in the study. A coincidence or something more?" Evelyn shook her head, sobbing. "Someone's framing me. I'd never hurt him." Poirot turned to Lionel. "Monsieur Drake, your debts? Did Sir Reginald threaten to end your engagement if you could not clear them?" Lionel's eyes flashed, his voice firm. "He was upset, but we reached an agreement. I love Clara. I had no reason to harm him." Poirot nodded, then addressed Collins. "Monsieur Collins, you handled the glove. You saw Sir Reginald last. Did you notice anything unusual in the study? A letter? A visitor?" Collins's hands clasped tighter, his voice steady but strained. "No, sir. He was writing as I said. I saw no letter, no one else." Poirot's eyes narrowed, sensing evasion. He turned to Japp. "Inspector, we must investigate this business deal further. Monsieur Grange's records, Sir Reginald's accounts, there may be evidence of embezzlement. And the earring, we must test its ownership. Mademoiselle Ward, may we see your remaining earring?" Evelyn nodded, fetching it from her room. It matched the one from the study, confirming her claim. But Poirot remained skeptical. Its presence could still be a plant. He directed Japp's men to search Grange's room for financial documents, and they returned with ledgers showing discrepancies. Funds redirected to cover Grange's personal debts, as Sir Reginald had suspected. The interrogation continued. Each suspect's story probed and tested. Grange's embezzlement gave him a strong motive, but his bluster seemed genuine fear, not guilt. Clara's inheritance and the codicil suggested a family secret, but her grief appeared real. Lionel's debts and shaky alibi raised suspicions, yet his devotion to Clara was evident. Evelyn's earring and perfume pointed to her, but her panic suggested a frame. Holt's secrecy about the codicil hinted at hidden knowledge, and Collins's access and nervousness made him a dark horse. Lady Beatrice's defense of Clara masked a deeper agenda, perhaps tied to family honor. As night fell, Poirot stood by the library window, the earring and glove in his pocket, the burned letter's words echoing in his mind. The business deal was a motive, but the clues, thread, scent, clock, letter, earring, suggested a killer weaving a complex web of deception. His little gray cells worked tirelessly, the truth a shadow just beyond his grasp, but growing clearer with each revelation. Chapter 11. The Family Scandal. The drawing room of Ashwood Manor was steeped in the somber glow of evening, its gas lamps casting a warm but uneasy light over the gathered guests, their faces etched with the strain of suspicion and sleeplessness. The heavy velvet curtains framed tall windows, beyond which the twilight gardens lay shrouded in mist, adding to the oppressive atmosphere within. Hercule Poirot stood by the grand fireplace, its embers flickering faintly, his small, immaculate figure a pillar of calm amidst the turbulent emotions swirling around him. His green eyes, sharp and unyielding, moved from one suspect to another, cataloging every gesture, every fleeting glance. Captain Hastings sat at a side table, his notebook brimming with observations, his honest face reflecting a mix of awe and exhaustion as he followed Poirot's relentless pursuit of the truth. Inspector Japp, his stocky frame slouched against the mantel, rubbed his bristling mustache, his frustration evident after days of unraveling the complex web of Sir Reginald Harrow's murder. The guests, seated in a tense semicircle, were a study in contrasts, their secrets laid bare yet still, cloaked in half-truths. Clara Harrow, her auburn hair loosely pinned, clutched a damp handkerchief, her pale face marked by grief and fear. Captain Lionel Drake, her fiancé, sat beside her, his military posture rigid, his hand resting protectively on hers, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Lady Beatrice Harrow, regal in her black mourning gown, maintained an imperious demeanor, her silver hair gleaming under the lamplight, her gaze cold and defiant. Victor Grange, Sir Reginald's business partner, slumped in an armchair, his ruddy face flushed from brandy, his fingers fidgeting nervously. Mr. Percival Holt, the lawyer, held his briefcase like a lifeline. His thin frame hunched, his spectacles catching the light as he avoided scrutiny. Miss Evelyn Ward, Clara's friend, twisted a silk scarf, her blue eyes wide with anxiety, her usual vivacity extinguished. Mr. Collins, the butler, stood by the sideboard, his posture stiff, his face a mask of professional detachment, though his hands clasped tightly behind his back. Monsieur Poirot, Japp said, his voice heavy with impatience. We've got motives aplenty: Grange's embezzlement, Clara's inheritance, Lionel's debts, Evelyn's loan, Holt's secrets, and who knows what Collins is hiding. But we're still circling. This family scandal Holt hinted at. What's it got to do with the murder? Let's get to the bottom of it. Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile, his voice clear and deliberate. Inspector, the scandal, it is a thread most vital in our tapestry. It touches the heart of the Harrow family, and the heart, it is where motives are born. Sir Reginald's murder, it is not merely a crime of greed or desperation, but of betrayal, of secrets long buried. We shall uncover this scandal, and in doing so, draw closer to the killer. He turned to the group, his presence commanding silence. Mesdames et messieurs, Sir Reginald Harrow was murdered in a locked study, stabbed with his own letter opener. We have clues: the ink-stained glove, the green thread, the jasmine scent, the burned letter, the pearl earring, the tampered clock. We have motives: debts, inheritance, embezzlement, and now, a family scandal hinted at by Monsieur Holt. Let us explore this, we? He fixed his gaze on Holt, whose fingers tightened on his briefcase, his face paling. Monsieur Holt, you spoke of a codicil concerning Mademoiselle Clara's legitimacy. Sir Reginald suspected she was not his daughter, based on rumors about his late wife. Tell us of this scandal and spare no detail. A heavy silence fell, broken only by Clara's sharp intake of breath. Her eyes widened, her handkerchief falling to her lap. Lionel's hand gripped hers, his jaw tightening. Lady Beatrice's lips pursed, her gaze sharp as a blade. Grange shifted uncomfortably, his brandy glass forgotten. Evelyn's eyes filled. With tears, her scarf twisted tightly. Collins remained still, though his eyes flickered to Clara, a fleeting moment Poirot noted. Holt adjusted his spectacles, his voice low and reluctant. It's a delicate matter, Monsieur Poirot. Years ago there were rumors that Lady Harrow, Sir Reginald's wife, had an affair during a trip to Paris. A child, Clara, was born soon after, and some questioned her paternity. Sir Reginald dismissed it at the time, but recently he found old letters among his wife's belongings suggesting the rumors might be true. He wanted to investigate, to protect Clara's inheritance, but also to know the truth. Clara's voice broke, her words barely audible. Not his daughter? That's impossible. Father loved me. He never said. Lionel cut in, his voice fierce. It's a lie, Clara. You're a Harrow through and through. This is nonsense, Holt. Lady Beatrice's voice was cold, her tone slicing through the tension. It's not nonsense, Captain Drake. My brother was a fool to dwell on it. But the rumors existed. I told him to let it die with my sister-in-law, but he was stubborn, digging up old wounds. Clara is his daughter in every way that matters. Poirot's eyes gleamed, his tone probing. Madame Beatrice, you knew of these rumors, yet you defended Mademoiselle Clara. Why? To protect the family name or something more? Lady Beatrice's gaze hardened. The Harrow name is sacred, Monsieur Poirot. Scandal would ruin us, and Clara, whatever the truth, is my niece. I'd not see her cast out. Poirot nodded, turning to Clara. Mademoiselle, did your father ever speak of this to you? Of doubts, of letters? Clara shook her head, her voice trembling. No, never. He was distant lately, worried, but he said it was business or the will. I thought he was protecting me. Poirot's gaze softened, but his mind was racing. The scandal provided a motive. Clara, fearing disinheritance, might have acted to secure her future. Or someone else, seeking to protect or exploit the secret, could have silenced Sir Reginald. He turned to Lionel. Monsieur Drake, you knew of this rumor, oui? Did Sir Reginald discuss it with you, perhaps threatening your engagement? Lionel's eyes flashed, his voice firm. He mentioned it once in anger during our argument about my debts. Said he'd ensure Clara's future no matter what. I told him I loved her, rumors or not. I'd no reason to harm him. Poirot's gaze lingered, sensing truth mingled with evasion. He turned to Evelyn. Mademoiselle Ward, you are Mademoiselle Clara's closest friend. Did she confide in you about her father's doubts? Evelyn's tears spilled over, her voice soft. She said he was acting strangely, talking about the past. I didn't know about this rumor until now. Clara's my friend. I'd never betray her. Poirot noted her loyalty, but also her nervousness. The pearl earring, found in the study, and her jasmine perfume still pointed to her, though possibly as a scapegoat. He turned to Grange. Monsieur Grange, this scandal, did Sir Reginald share it with you, perhaps as leverage in your business disputes? Grange shook his head, his voice slurred. No, he never mentioned it. Our arguments were about money, not family gossip. I didn't care about Clara's parentage. Poirot's eyes narrowed, then settled on Collins. Monsieur Collins, you served the Harrow family for years. Were you aware of these rumors about Lady Harrow? Collins's hands clasped tighter, his voice steady but strained. Such matters were above my station, sir. I heard nothing of it. Poirot's smile was thin, sensing evasion. He turned to Japp. Inspector, we must examine these letters Monsieur Holt mentioned. They may hold the key to the scandal, and to the burned letter found in the study. Japp nodded, dispatching a constable to retrieve Holt's briefcase which contained the legal documents. Holt reluctantly opened it, producing a sealed envelope marked Private. Poirot examined it, noting its similarity to the burned letters. Paper, fine, expensive, with a faint watermark. Inside were letters from Lady Harrow written decades ago, hinting at a liaison in Paris but offering no definitive proof. The handwriting, Poirot noted, differed from the burned letters, ruling out Lady Harrow as its author. "This scandal," Poirot said, holding up the letters, "it is a motive, but also a distraction. The burned letter spoke of betrayal, perhaps tied to this rumor, but its author remains unknown. The glove, the thread, the earring, the perfume, they point to Mademoiselle Clara or Mademoiselle Ward, yet feel staged. The killer, they wish us to look at the family, but Poirot, he looks deeper. He paced the room, his polished shoes silent on the rug, his mind weaving the clues together. The scandal suggested Clara as a suspect, desperate to secure her inheritance, but her grief seemed genuine. Lionel's knowledge of the rumor gave him motive, yet his devotion to Clara appeared real. Lady Beatrice's defense of the family name hinted at a deeper agenda, perhaps protecting a secret beyond Clara's legitimacy. Grange's embezzlement remained a strong motive, but his fear seemed to outweigh guilt. Evelyn's earring and perfume made her a target, but her panic suggested a frame. Holt's secrecy about the codicil pointed to hidden knowledge, and Collins's access and nervousness made him a quiet. Chapter 12. The Perfume Trap. The drawing room of Ashwood Manor was steeped in the soft glow of gas lamps, their flickering light casting intricate shadows across the heavy velvet drapes and the polished oak floor. The air was thick with the scent of wax and the faint lingering trace of tension that had settled over the house like a shroud. Hercule Poirot stood by the grand fireplace, its embers glowing faintly, his small, immaculate figure a pillar of calm amidst the storm of suspicion that swirled around the gathered guests. His green eyes, sharp and unyielding, swept over the group, cataloging every gesture, every fleeting expression of fear or defiance. Captain Hastings sat at a small writing desk, his notebook filled with pages of hurried notes. His honest face, etched with a mix of awe and exhaustion, as he followed Poirot's relentless pursuit of the truth. Inspector Japp leaned against the mantel, his stocky frame restless, his bristling mustache twitching with impatience as he awaited Poirot's next revelation in the complex puzzle of Sir Reginald Harrow's murder. The guests, their faces drawn from sleeplessness and the weight of scrutiny, sat in a tense semicircle. Clara Harrow, her auburn hair loosely pinned, clutched a handkerchief, her tear-streaked face pale, her eyes haunted by grief. Captain Lionel Drake, her fiancé, sat protectively beside her, his military posture rigid, though his hands betrayed a slight tremor as he held her arm. Lady Beatrice Harrow, regal in her black mourning gown, sat erect, her silver hair gleaming under the lamplight, her gaze cold and imperious. Victor Grange, Sir Reginald's business partner, slumped in an armchair, his ruddy face flushed from brandy, his fingers fidgeting with an unlit cigarette. Mr. Percival Holt, the lawyer, held his briefcase like a shield, his thin frame hunched, his spectacles catching the light as he avoided eye contact. Miss Evelyn Ward, Clara's friend, twisted a silk scarf, her blue eyes wide with anxiety, her usual vivacity dimmed by fear. Mr. Collins, the butler, stood by the sideboard, his posture stiff, his face a mask of professional detachment, though, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. "Monsieur Poirot," Japp said, his voice heavy with frustration. "We've got a locked room, a glove, a thread, a burned letter, an earring, a tampered clock, a dodgy business deal, and now this, family scandal about Clara's parentage. You're pulling at every thread, but where's it leading? Who's the killer?" Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile, his voice clear and deliberate. "Inspector, the threads, they are many, but they weave a single tapestry. The truth. The murder of Sir Reginald Harrow is a crime of cunning, and the killer they have left clues to mislead us. But one clue, it is more subtle than the others, the scent of jasmine in the study. Today, we shall set a trap using this perfume to catch a killer." Hastings' eyes widened, his pen pausing mid-scribble. A trap, Poirot? With perfume? How's that going to work? Poirot raised a hand, his expression enigmatic. Patience, mon ami. The jasmine scent, it is a clue most curious. It matches Mademoiselle Ward's perfume, yet she denies being in the study. Is it hers, or was it used to frame her? We shall test this, and in doing so, reveal the killer's hand. He turned to the group, his presence commanding silence. Mesdames et messieurs, the study where Sir Reginald was murdered carried a scent of jasmine, faint but unmistakable. This scent, it is a signature, perhaps of the killer, or perhaps a deception. I ask now that each lady, Mademoiselle Clara, Mademoiselle Ward, Madame Beatrice, provide a sample of their perfume to compare with the scent I detected. Monsieur Collins, fetch small vials and blotting paper, if you please. Collins nodded, his composure faltering slightly, and left to retrieve the items. The guests exchanged uneasy glances, Clara's hand tightening on her handkerchief, Evelyn's face paling, Lady Beatrice's lips pursing. Lionel's jaw clenched, his eyes darting to Clara. Grange took a swig from a flask, his unease evident. Holt adjusted his spectacles, his fingers restless. Japp muttered, Perfume, Poirot? You're banking on a smell to crack this case? Oui, Inspector, Poirot said, his tone resolute. The nose, it does not lie, though the mind may deceive. The scent, it is a clue overlooked by the killer, and it will lead us to them. Collins returned with vials and blotting paper, and Poirot instructed the ladies to apply their perfumes to the paper. Clara hesitated, her voice soft. I don't wear much perfume, Monsieur Poirot. Just a light rosewater for special occasions. She dabbed a small amount onto the paper, its scent delicate and floral, distinct from jasmine. Poirot nodded, taking the sample. He turned to Evelyn, whose hands trembled as she opened a small bottle. This is mine, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jasmine from Paris, I wore it at dinner. She applied it to the paper and Poirot inhaled deeply, his eyes narrowing. The scent was a close match to the study's, rich and sweet with a hint of spice. He set it aside, his mind racing. He turned to Lady Beatrice, who raised an eyebrow, her tone sharp. I rarely use such frivolities, Monsieur Poirot, but if you insist, I have a lavender scent. She applied a drop to the paper, its crisp herbal note far removed from jasmine. Poirot took it, his expression unreadable. He held the 3 samples, comparing them to his memory of the study's scent. Evelyn's jasmine was the closest, yet something nagged at him, a subtle difference perhaps in intensity or undertone. Interesting, Poirot murmured, his gaze sweeping the room. Mademoiselle Ward's perfume, it is a near match, yet not exact. The study's scent was stronger, more concentrated, as though applied deliberately. This suggests a trap, non? The killer. They used jasmine to point to Mademoiselle Ward, but how did they obtain it? Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, her voice breaking. I told you, Monsieur Poirot, I wasn't in the study. Someone must have taken my perfume. It's always on my dressing table. Poirot's tone softened, though his eyes remained sharp. Mademoiselle, who has access to your room? The maid, perhaps? Or another guest? Evelyn hesitated, glancing at Clara. The maid, yes, and, well, Clara and I visit each other's rooms often, but no one else. Poirot nodded, turning to Clara. Mademoiselle Clara, did you borrow Mademoiselle Ward's perfume, perhaps for the dinner? Clara shook her head, her voice firm. No, I used my rosewater. I don't like jasmine. It's too strong. Poirot's gaze shifted to Collins, who stood silently by the sideboard. Monsieur Collins, as butler, you oversee the household. Have you seen Mademoiselle Ward's perfume bottle or noticed anyone near her room? Collins's hands clasped tighter, his voice steady but strained. No, sir. I don't enter the ladies' rooms unless requested. The maids handle cleaning. Poirot's smile was thin, his mind noting the butler's unease. He turned to the group, holding up Evelyn's sample. This perfume, it is a clue but also a deception. The killer. They wished us to suspect Mademoiselle Ward. Just as the thread points to Mademoiselle Clara, the earring to Mademoiselle Ward, the glove to either. But who had access to all these things? He paced the room, his polished shoes silent. On the rug, the clues swirling in his mind. The ink-stained glove, the green thread, the jasmine scent, the burned letter, the pearl earring, the tampered clock, the codicil, the business deal, the family scandal. The glove, fitting Clara or Evelyn, suggested a woman's involvement, but its placement at the table was deliberate. The thread, matching Clara's shawl, seemed planted. The earring, Evelyn's, could be a frame. The letters talk of betrayal, tied to the scandal or Grange's embezzlement. The clock, 5 minutes slow, altered the timeline. The codicil questioned Clara's legitimacy, and Grange's financial misconduct gave him motive. But the perfume, this was a personal touch, requiring access to Evelyn's belongings. "Inspector," Poirot said, turning to Japp, "we must search Mademoiselle Ward's room again, with her permission, to confirm her perfume bottle's presence and condition." Evelyn nodded, her voice trembling. "Go ahead, Monsieur Poirot, I've nothing to hide." Japp dispatched a constable, and Poirot joined the search, his eyes scanning Evelyn's room, a feminine space of soft pinks and lace, with a dressing table cluttered with cosmetics. The jasmine perfume bottle was there, half full, its stopper, slightly loose as though recently used. Poirot inhaled its scent, confirming its match to the sample, but noted a faint smudge on the bottle's base, ink, similar to the glove's stain. "This bottle," Poirot said, holding it up. "It has been handled perhaps by someone other than Mademoiselle Ward. The ink, it links to the glove, to the desk. The killer, they took this perfume, applied it, in the study to mislead us." He returned to the drawing room, the bottle in his pocket, and resumed his questioning. "Mesdames et messieurs, the perfume, it was used to frame Mademoiselle Ward just as the earring was placed to implicate her. But who could access her room, her perfume, her jewelry? Someone with intimate knowledge of this household." He turned to Clara, his tone gentle. "Mademoiselle, you and Mademoiselle Ward are close. Did anyone else visit your rooms? Perhaps borrow your shawl, your perfume?" Clara shook her head, her voice soft. "No, just us. The maids, of course, but they're trustworthy." Poirot nodded, then addressed Lionel. "Monsieur Drake, you are often with Mademoiselle Clara. Did you notice anyone near their rooms after dinner?" Lionel's jaw tightened, his voice firm. "No, I was in the garden, as I said. I saw no one." Poirot turned to Lady Beatrice. "Madame, your room is near the study. Did you see or hear anyone moving about?" Chapter 13. The Clock's Secret. The grand hall of Ashwood Manor was steeped in the somber glow of twilight, its high ceilings adorned with intricate plasterwork that seemed to loom over the gathered guests like silent sentinels. The air was heavy, with the scent of polished wood and the faint tang of wax from the flickering candelabras, their light casting long shadows across the marble floor. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the hall, his small, immaculate figure a beacon of calm amidst the storm of suspicion that had enveloped the house since Sir Reginald Harrow's murder. His green eyes, sharp and unyielding, swept over the group, cataloging every gesture, every flicker of unease. Captain Hastings stood to his right, his notebook clutched tightly, his honest face etched with a mix of anticipation and exhaustion as he awaited Poirot's next revelation. Inspector Japp leaned against a pillar, his stocky frame restless, his bristling mustache twitching with impatience as he grappled with the mounting complexities of the case. The guests, their faces drawn from sleeplessness and the weight of scrutiny, stood in a tense semicircle. Clara Harrow, her auburn hair loosely pinned, clutched a handkerchief, her tear-streaked face pale, her eyes haunted by grief. Captain Lionel, Drake, her fiancé, stood protectively beside her, his military posture rigid, though his hands betrayed a slight tremor as he held her arm. Lady Beatrice Harrow, regal in her black morning gown, stood erect, her silver hair gleaming under the candlelight, her gaze cold and imperious. Victor Grange, Sir Reginald's business partner, leaned against a chair, his ruddy face flushed from brandy, his fingers fidgeting with an unlit cigarette. Mr. Percival Holt, the lawyer, held his briefcase like a shield, his thin frame hunched, his spectacles catching the light as he avoided eye contact. Miss Evelyn Ward, Clara's friend, twisted a silk scarf, her blue eyes wide with anxiety, her usual vivacity dimmed by fear. Mr. Collins, the butler, stood by the grand staircase, his posture stiff, his face a mask of professional detachment, though his hands clasped tightly behind his back. "Monsieur Poirot," Japp said, his voice heavy with frustration. "We've chased every clue you've thrown at us. Glove, thread, perfume, letter, earring, business deal, family scandal. Now you're fixated on that clock in the study, 5 minutes slow. What's it got to do with anything? Let's pin down the killer." Poirot's mustache twitched with a faint smile, his voice clear and resolute. "Inspector, the clock, it is not merely a device for telling time, it is a witness to the crime. Its hands, they were altered, and in that alteration lies a secret, a deliberate act by the killer to deceive us. Today we shall uncover the clock's secret, and it will bring us closer to the truth." Hastings's eyes widened, his pen pausing mid-scribble. "The clock, Poirot? You think someone tampered with it to cover their tracks?" "Exactement, mon ami," Poirot said, his tone intense. "The clock in the study, it was 5 minutes slow, a discrepancy not found in the Manor's other timepieces. This is no accident, but a calculated move to shift the timeline of Sir Reginald's murder. We shall examine it, and its secret will speak." He turned to the group, his presence commanding silence. "Mesdames et messieurs, Sir Reginald was murdered in a locked room, stabbed with his own letter opener, a glove misplaced, a thread left, a perfume scented, a letter burned, an earring dropped. Each clue is a piece of the puzzle, but the clock, it holds the key to the when and the who. Let us return to the study to uncover its truth." Poirot led the way to the study, the guests trailing behind, their faces a mix of dread and curiosity. The room was as they had left it, papers scattered, the desk stained with ink, the fireplace cold, and Sir Reginald's body now removed, though the outline of his tragedy lingered. The clock, a heavy mahogany piece on the mantel, ticked softly, its hands still 5 minutes behind the hall clock. Poirot approached it, his tweezers in hand, his eyes narrowing as he inspected the mechanism. "Observe, Inspector," he said, pointing to a faint scratch near the winding key. "This mark, it is fresh, made by a tool, perhaps a knife or pin, used to open the clock's back. Someone adjusted its hands to make the murder appear earlier or later than it was." Japp leaned closer, his skepticism evident. "Tampered with, you say? But why? To confuse us about alibis?" "Oui," Poirot said, his voice low. "The scream was heard at midnight, by Mademoiselle Ward and others. If the clock was set back, the murder may have occurred earlier, giving the killer time to establish an alibi. Or if set forward, it could make an alibi seem impossible. We must test this." He carefully opened the clock's back, revealing its intricate gears. A small pin, slightly bent, lay loose among them as though dropped in haste. Poirot extracted it with his tweezers, holding it aloft. "This pin, it was used to tamper with the clock. It is not part of the mechanism, but an intruder left by the killer's hand." Hastings gasped, his notebook forgotten. "Good Lord, Poirot, that's proof someone fiddled with it, but who?" Poirot's eyes gleamed, his mind racing. He turned to the group, the pin in his pocket, and began his questioning. "Mesdames et messieurs, the clock's tampering suggests a killer with knowledge of this house, its routines, its timepieces. Let us revisit your alibis, for one will crack under this new light." He started with Clara, his tone gentle but probing. "Mademoiselle Clara, you were in your room reading at midnight, oui? Did you check the time, perhaps by a watch or clock?" Clara's voice trembled, her eyes fixed on her hands. I glanced at my bedside clock, yes. It was just before midnight when Evelyn left my room. Then I heard the scream." Poirot nodded, turning to Evelyn. "Mademoiselle Ward, you left Mademoiselle Clara's room to fetch a book and heard the scream from your own room, near the study. Did you note the time?" Evelyn's cheeks flushed, her voice soft. "My room's clock said midnight, or just after. I ran out right away." Poirot's gaze shifted to Lionel. Monsieur Drake, you were in the garden, smoking, you claim. Did you have a watch to know the time? Lionel's jaw tightened, his voice firm but strained. My pocket watch, yes. It was around midnight when I heard the scream and came inside. Poirot turned to Lady Beatrice, her imperious demeanor unshaken. Madame, you heard footsteps at 10:30 but stayed in your room. Did you check your clock at midnight? Lady Beatrice's lips pursed, her voice cold. My mantel clock struck 12, just before the scream. I thought it was Reginald, still working. Poirot nodded, moving to Grange. Monsieur Grange, you were in the library, distracted, you said. Did you note the time? Grange shrugged, his voice gruff. Didn't check. Library clock was ticking, but I wasn't paying attention. Poirot turned to Holt. Monsieur Holt, you were working in your room drafting notes. Did you have a clock or watch? Holt adjusted his spectacles, his voice low. My desk clock, yes. It was midnight when I heard the scream. Finally, Poirot addressed Collins. Monsieur Collins, you were in the kitchen overseeing staff. Did you check the kitchen clock? Collins's hands clasped tighter, his voice steady but strained. Yes, sir. It was midnight just as the scream came. Poirot's smile was thin, his mind weaving the clues together. The ink-stained glove, the green thread, the jasmine scent, the burned letter, the pearl earring, the tampered clock, the codicil, the business deal, the family scandal. The glove suggested a woman's involvement. The thread pointed to Clara, the scent to Evelyn, the earring to her as well, the letter to betrayal, the codicil to inheritance, Grange's embezzlement to greed, and now the clock to a manipulated timeline. Each alibi hinged on time, and the clock's tampering suggested someone needed those 5 minutes to cover their tracks. Inspector, Poirot said, turning to Japp. We must compare the Manor's clocks. The studies is slow. But are others tampered with? And we must search for tools, a knife, a pin that could make this scratch. Japp nodded, dispatching constables to check the clocks and search the guests' rooms. Poirot joined the search, his eyes scanning every detail. Clara's room held a bedside clock, accurate to the halls. Evelyn's room clock matched, but a small sewing kit contained a pin similar to the one in the study clock. Lionel's room had his pocket watch, also accurate, but no tools. Lady Beatrice's mantel clock was precise, with no suspicious items. Grange's room was cluttered, but held only brandy bottles. Holt's desk clock was correct, his briefcase yielding only papers. Collins' quarters were sparse, but a locked box, when opened under Japp's insistence, contained a small knife with a scratched blade, matching the clock's mark. Returning to the hall, Poirot held up the knife, found in Collins' box, and the pin from Evelyn's kit. These tools, he said, they could tamper with a clock. Monsieur Collins, Mademoiselle Ward, explain their presence. Evelyn gasped, her voice breaking. That pin's for sewing. I've never touched a clock. Collins's face paled, his voice strained. The knife, sir, it's for repairs, small tasks around the house. I've never used it on a clock. Poirot's gaze was unrelenting, his trap tightening. He turned to the group. The clock's secret, it is time. And time, it reveals the killer's hand. Someone needed 5 minutes to enter the study, to stab Sir Reginald, to burn the letter, to plant the thread, the earring, the perfume, to use the glove, to escape. Who had those minutes? And how? He resumed his questioning, probing deeper. Clara's solitude was unconfirmed, her bedside clock accurate but unchecked by others. Evelyn's scream was timely,